Coleman. Great. So being 6 o'clock on Monday, September the 17th, 2018, we'll call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. We will also be joined this evening by the Winooski School Board, who will give an opportunity to call to order when we come to that item in a few moments. But first off, we'll ask that everybody in our call to order please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Nicole Mace.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, a couple quick items. First up, we have agenda review. This is an opportunity for council to add, move, or discuss any agenda ordering items. I think we stacked things up so we could get through things with the expected order of attendance of guests, etc. Any questions or concerns? Good, so seeing and hearing none, we'll move forward with the agenda as posted. Next up is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the council about any items that are not on tonight's agenda. As a reminder, you can find tonight's agenda on the back podium. And we also have a sign-in sheet there. We appreciate members of the public also taking an opportunity to sign in case you speak. And we need to make sure we spell your names correctly in the minutes. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Going once. All right. So seeing and hearing none, we'll move forward with the rest of the city council agenda. And first up tonight, we have the joint meeting with the school board trustees. And tonight we'll be discussing the memorandum of understanding between the city of Winooski and the Winooski Incorporated School District for 2018 and 19. We're very pleased to welcome our distinguished guests this evening. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to come in, and we'll let you do your official call to order so you can be a functioning body.
Thank you for the invite, appreciate that. I'd like to call the meeting to order, document the time at 6:03. And here for our joint meeting this evening. Kick it back to you.
Great. So this is something that, oh gosh, I don't know how many years we've had the MOU running now, but you know, I think it gets lost sometimes, certainly by the emails I get, I know it does, by members of the public, but Winooski has what's called a totally unique system where we have a separately incorporated by charter municipality in the city and the school, which has its own separate charter. And by way of our two bodies having those separate and distinct creations, I think it can lend itself for entities like us to work in silos. And I think what we've done in the past is take really tremendous steps towards seeing a real cohesive working together for the betterment of the community. And I think this MOU really represents one of the most, us formalizing a lot of the relationship that we've developed between department heads, between staff. We acknowledge Chu Shang Ban, Superintendent of School, and Jesse Baker, our city manager, and numerous other department and staff members that we know work back and forth. Because we recognize, I think, as a city and I think the spirit of this MOU supports that there's a continuum of service and a continuum of care for community members that doesn't start and stop where our sidewalks end and their property begins, and doesn't start and stop where the doorways of the schools are, where it's okay, kids, go forth and do what you do, right? It's a holistic view of how we care for, provide opportunities, and create an environment in our city that's a great place to live and a place where people can raise families and be successful. So we couldn't be more proud to work with you. Really appreciate all the efforts that you've gone through over the past several years since I've been involved. You know, not just to show up for this meeting once a year, but to be engaged in the city planning processes, to invite us to be engaged in your planning processes, and really having meaningful exchanges about how we provide coordinated service in the ways that we're allowed to, and ways that best serve the community. So we couldn't be happier to welcome you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a memorandum of understanding here, and I think I'll turn back towards our two key leaders on the other side of the table and ask if there's any comments or items you guys want to address?
So I'll start, but you can jump in. So what you have before you is a revised memorandum of understanding built upon last year's base. It's very similar to last year. If you remember last year, we made a few changes around mutually participating in some planning processes and about allowing some flexibility as the city maintains the plowing service for the school. So we've retained those in here. It also, of course, talks about our SRO, our relationship around our school resource officer and our police department, providing care for kids out of school time through our community services department, and other shared priorities. But really, there's no significant difference from last year to this year. And we think it's working well and would like to continue these shared expectations.
I think the only thing I'd say, the biggest change year to year is that our new logo is on the memorandum. And we've given the counselors a swag bag there with a shirt and a water bottle and some stickers and pins, and we hope that you will wear and use those out and about in the city so that we can continue getting that logo out there as part of our overall branding and communications plan in kind of shifting the narrative of the school district.
For folks at home, I'm curious as to what that looks like. Very nice.
Very well done.
Thanks. Thank you very much. We appreciate the gesture too. Anything from the school?
I think I'd like to just start with just two items actually out of this MOU that I've seen grow over the years, and a couple of them, one of them in particular, pays back dividends I don't think we realize, and that is the SRO. I don't think there's really a whole lot of doubt that it can prove its worth having an officer in a school, but I look at it as the protection hopefully we never need, and they never need to use any kind of force in the school at all for any reason. But what I'm seeing now is we've got at least 3, if not 4 officers on the force that have spent time doing the SRO role. And I know that pays huge dividends out in the community when they do monitor around town in the summertime when they're not in the school. I think that makes a huge difference. One quick story about Ron Jackson after his tears, he couldn't stop at stop signs without being accosted by kids to the point where he had to tell them to stay there, I'll come see you, because they were coming across the road to see him. So, you know, that relationship is what we're trying to build. The side benefit of having him there for protection if we need it, we hope we never need it. The other one was the after-school programs run by the city. The one comment, I'll leave it at that, from one of the students, I can't get away from it. Goes to the after-school program, he hears the same words he's hearing in school. But it's the same discipline and the same reactions. The kids, it became almost seamless of who was there. We moved the after-school programs to the school from the O'Brien Center so the kids didn't have to travel and move. So essentially they got another 20 minutes to a half hour of care, but the faces changed, but the attitude stayed the same. So I think those two things, along with just talking about the day-to-day things that we talk about, where do we interact and how can we do things better, have made this a worthwhile, again, not paying the tax dollar twice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's made a big difference.
If I could add to that briefly, I'm not sure the council is fully aware of this, and apologies to the superintendent for stealing a staff person, but one of the very side benefits of the SRO, I really agree with you, Mike, that there are huge benefits on both sides, we're starting to look at it as really a recruitment tool. You know, how do we talk with young people about the profession of public safety and start thinking about giving those opportunities. And we were able to recruit somebody from the school. Unfortunately, it was a staff person, but a behavioral interventionist who spent 6 years working with our kids and families, who then decided to take his career into public safety and is now at the part-time academy becoming a Winooski police officer. And the benefit of that young police officer starting knowing a lot of our families already, I think, is a huge advantage to our community.
Hey,
So
Seth,
sorry about the.
we may have to add a section to
Yeah, right. I know.
talk about that later.
I'm thinking about who we need to start whispering in our ears to be like, it's really good over here, guys.
I
appreciate Sean's participation on the Housing Commission. I think that's a really important perspective to continue to bring the insights and information and perspectives that are brought through working so closely with families that live in this community to a lot of our planning processes is really, really important. So thank you for supporting that work on the city side.
That's right. Other items from councilors?
And promise communities. A lot of time and commitment.
That joint, again, that collaboration, it benefits the community tremendously, and it doesn't happen without us breaking down those silos that could have naturally stopped us or been an impediment to our cooperative approach to building the best community that we can provide. And you know, at the risk of you know, sounding too boastful, this, you know, I think people look at Winooski right now as a community that's heading in a really exciting direction, and we know that that's not just the city, and it's not just restaurants. The innovation taking place at the school that I have reflected to me on a regular basis has just become a cornerstone benchmark of conversation anytime I leave the city and have conversations with other leaders across the state, that there's a real appreciation for the approach that's being utilized at the school, and that's a huge testament to you guys' willingness to innovate, and we'll try to hold up our end of that bargain and do the same thing when appropriate, but mostly try to provide that canvas for the community to paint on. So thank you for all you do.
And I guess I would add that I know through my work with the Partnership for Change that Winooski School District is a real gem. And I think they're really part of the process of changing the narrative for our community. So thank you for your great work.
Some of our hardest work is communicating that internally. We see a lot of comments from around the state, and just making sure that the folks in Winooski understand what it is that's going on. That's well, you guys understand that the challenge of getting out into the community and getting, you know, the word out is, you know, one of the, it is our role. So continue to work at that.
So now I think we usually do read the content aloud. I want to open up to any comments from the community prior to doing so before we read through the memorandum of understanding between the City of Winooski and the Winooski Incorporated School District. Any comments, questions, concerns, or reflections from the public tonight? Okay. So seeing and hearing none, if it sounds agreeable, Mike, maybe we'll do the preamble and the city agrees to, and then you guys want to read the district agrees to and the collaborative item to close us out? Great. Okay, so we have tonight before us a memorandum of understanding between the City of Winooski and the Winooski Incorporated School District dated the 17th of September 2018. This memorandum of understanding is made this day between the Winooski Incorporated School District, hereinafter called District, and the City of Winooski, hereinafter called City. This MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, is intended to clearly state the shared goals of both the city and the district and to identify areas of collaboration that will allow both parties to best serve the needs of all Winooski residents. By moving towards a model of collective impact, which includes a common agenda, shared measurement system, mutually reinforcing activities, and continuous communication, the city and district will strive to provide the highest level of service in the most economical manner as we seek to achieve the district's ends policy, which states all students will graduate from the Winooski School District college and career ready at a cost supported by the majority of the Winooski community. Winooski School District students will lead healthy, productive, and successful lives and engage in their local and global community. To this end, the city agrees to provide and or support a diverse offering of out-of-school time programs with supplement and enhance the youth's ability to lead healthy, productive, and successful lives and engage in their local and global community. This will include, but not be limited to, the Thrive Summer Program, Thrive After School Program, Summer and School Year Meals Program, O'Brien Center Tutoring Program, Summer Teen Employment Program, or STEP, and the coordination of various volunteer service learning opportunities. Number 2, commit to, where possible, employing youth development and behavior management strategies and city-run programs that align or support those strategies being employed by the district. Number 3, provide students with community-based learning opportunities through various functions of city government where possible. Number 4, use the district's newly adopted graduate expectations as an outcome measurement tool and as part of programmatic goal setting when appropriate. Number 5, foster a range of housing options and ensure safe, well-built, well-maintained, and affordable housing throughout the city. Number 6, provide a variety of transportation options through complete streets that take into account the needs of motorists, bicyclists, public transportation users, and pedestrians of all ages and abilities. And number 7, the city agrees to provide snow plowing and salting services to the school. The service will be managed or provided by the city's Department of Public Works. Operational procedures shall be decided by the superintendent of schools or designee as negotiated with the Public Works Director or their designee. Those individuals should create a written agreement in consultation with the superintendent of schools and city managers each fall. The district reserves the right to put out to bid its snow plowing, salting, and sanding services on the open market. In the case that the district decides to contract out said services, the city shall have no responsibilities related to the same. District agrees to inform the city each year in the month of November if it intends to exercise the option the following year. If the district exceeds or elects to exercise this option and so notifies the city in the month of November, the city will have no obligation to provide such services in the fiscal year. I feel like I just read the small print in a...
Yep. The district agrees to, 1, annually, the district will pay to the city 1/2 of 1% of statewide property taxes it collects as provided in Section 8B of the district charter, less any amount the state has directed the city to retain for tax collection purposes as set forth on the tax statements provided to the parties by the Department of Education. 2, the district agrees to name the city as a subsidiary purchaser when it bids bulk purchased items and commonly used services. Such items will include, but not be limited to, office products, paper supplies, cleaning materials, copy paper, rubbish removal, and similar commonly used by both entities. The city shall order such goods and services directly from the vendor and be solely responsible for the payment of the same. Collectively, the city and district agree to, 1, at the district's request, the city shall provide a school resource officer through the Winooski Police Department. The district agrees to reimburse the city for all expenses related to the provision of the SRO, including salary, benefits, and any related cost up to $55,000 as approved by the voters. Each year, the city will estimate for the district in the month of November the cost of the SRO for the ensuing school year. Computation will be determined as follows. The number of duty days requested by the district divided by 260 days of a full-time officer times the cost of that officer. The district and the city agree that the cost of benefits for a full-time officer will be included in the calculated cost of the SRO. Should the city not place a full-time officer at the school shall pay for the actual cost of the part-time officer while at the school. The SRO functions as a member of the Winooski Police Department and as such will follow the general order issued by the Chief of Police after consultation with the Superintendent of Schools and in compliance with the board policies that do not countermand the role of a police officer. 2, allow the other to use its facilities for the benefit of Winooski residents, especially families and children, without charge, except that when substantial added costs ensue due either to the city or the district for the use of the same by the other party, a reasonable charge may be assessed. 3, the district will participate in city staff and manage citywide planning efforts to ensure that all voices are heard and the best future for the city of Winooski is discussed. This shall include the citywide master planning process. 4, in order to foster a range of housing options and ensure safe, well-built, well-maintained, and affordable housing through the city, the district agrees to participate in the city chartered and staffed housing commission. In order to provide the best services to the residents, families, and businesses of Winooski and maintain the city's affordability, the city and district agreed to participate in professional development opportunities around municipal financing tools and to continually communicate and cooperate on long-term capital planning. The terms of this agreement expire September 30th, 2019.
Well written, well done. Any questions, concerns, or comments from the council? Any questions, concerns, comments from the public?
Any concerns or comments from the school board?
So seeing and hearing none, again, with great gratitude for you for coming here tonight. We appreciate it. We appreciate all your work, and look forward to continuing to work with all of you on making Winooski the best we can. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
And with that, I would entertain a motion from City Council in regards to the School District Board of Trustees and Winooski City Council memorandum of understanding between the City of Winooski and the Winooski Incorporated School District.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Hal. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries.
All right. On behalf of the school board, I would accept the motion to accept the MOU as written. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Great. All right.
It's unanimous. That's great. Now, I think the school board's gonna continue to conduct business. More things to do tonight, too.
Convene at a spot designated.
It's great. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, obviously, as things move along, we're always around, so anything just changes or questions, we're available.
Thank you for coming.
I want to write a council, so.
I kind of like, you're sitting being surrounded by all the books. I like that. Next time we'll have our joint meeting in the Public Works Garage, where our cool stuff is.
That's a lot closer to my house over here.
Right.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So on this evening's agenda, we also have a liquor control board meeting, so we're actually gonna do a brief recess on the city council meeting, and we will reconvene that meeting following the liquor control board meeting, which is set for 6:15. So we will return to the regular agenda in a few moments. First up tonight, we do have a liquor control board meeting, and I would, being Monday, September the 17th, 2018, I'll call order the liquor control board meeting and ask everybody to please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Nicole Mace.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one item on tonight's liquor control board meeting, and that's approval of first-class liquor license, restaurant license, and entertainment permit for Four Quarters Brewing LLC at 150 West Canal Street, Suite 1.
So Brian is here tonight. Brian recently went through the DRB process to get approval, or conditional use approval for some additional space usage, and is going through the process of complying with those requirements. So we recommend the approval of this liquor license.
Great. Any concerns to express from staff in terms of normal operations or otherwise?
No.
Anything cool, exciting, and new coming you want to share with the public?
All sorts of stuff.
And if that's the way you want to keep it, that's okay. That's all right. We gauged the age of your business by the fact that the first time that you came in here, I think they were both yay large. So they've been with it since the beginning. It's good. They understand the municipal permitting process. It's exciting stuff. Come on. Oh, Brian, exciting to have you in town. Appreciate all that your business does to create that vibrancy and work, and excited to see you continue to grow and thrive here. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Any questions or concerns from Liquor Control Board? Any questions, concerns, or comments from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for approval of first-class liquor license, restaurant license, and entertainment permit for the Four Quarters Brewing LLC located at 150 West Street, Suite 1.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Christine, second by Nicole. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Permits are granted. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. We will now reconvene tonight's city council meeting. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. That concludes tonight's liquor control board meeting. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Hallie. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Now we will reconvene tonight's city council meeting. We'll open up, picking up with the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. We have the city council liquor control minutes from September 4th, 2018, the payroll warrants from the 26th of August and 8th of September, warrants ending in September the 14th, and subsequent payout for July. We also have the reaffirm assignment of reserves to operating expenses as described in the consent package and discussed in the previous meeting. Any questions or concerns from council in regards to the consent agenda? Any questions or concerns from the public? Seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Christine, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And those opposed? Motion carries. City update.
Great, thank you. So a couple of updates for you tonight. One, Angel is here tonight for her first official meeting taking our minutes, so thank you for being here. And I also want to introduce Olivia Miller, who is here tonight. She's our new AmeriCorps member, and you'll meet her more in depth at a future meeting, but just wanted to call her out in the crowd. We're happy to have her on board.
Welcome.
A few other updates. So we've been talking about our fall housing series, so that there'll be 3 different discussions, 2 at regular housing commission meetings as they go through the process to move those ordinances forward, and then a special conversation on Tuesday, October 9th from 6 to 8 here in the city council chambers. And confirmed panelists that evening include Mike Monty, Earhart, Brian Pine, and Eric Hoekstra. So it's a good panel. They're all excited to be here, and we hope, broadly invite the public to come out and learn about housing policies and tools and tools the council and planning commission and housing commission are considering to meet the city's goals. City clerk's office has received the state general election ballots for November, so those will go out to those who have requested absentee ballots on Friday. And if people are interested in receiving absentee ballots, give us a call and we will send them out. And of course, later in the meeting, if we move forward with a local ballot, we'll track everyone who requests ballots and send them out in partnership later on. As you have heard me talk about before, one of the things we've done in the last year is stand up a safety committee in the city. It's something traditionally municipalities do in conjunction with their insurance provider to talk about employee safety and really hear from employees the tools and training and resources they need to feel safe at work. So that committee has been working really hard in the last probably 9 months and is launching 2 trainings this fall. One was for public works staff who will be doing confined space training. So when they're down in holes, fixing water leaks, usually in really unsavory conditions, training around how to stay safe in those environments. And then excitingly for everybody, on October 24th, we will have a driving simulator here that will allow the employees to simulate driving big plow trucks, driving fire trucks, doing police pursuits, and not only fine-tune their own abilities, but allow their peers to understand what they're doing on the street, which is very exciting and supported by the League of Cities and Towns, which is great. We have been, in the last couple of city updates, we've been giving you updates on new businesses coming to town. So wanted to welcome Friends Nepali Restaurant at 212 Main Street, the previous location of Pho Mein. They are open and from all reports, very good. So visit with them. Staff is continuing our FY20 budget process. Today we met as a leadership team and reviewed staff allocation. So as you've seen through the budget process, we have many staff who are allocated to different funds. So reviewed that comprehensively to see if it reflected what the actual work of the job is, and that will be baked into our proposed budget to you all this fall. And then finally, we had a Chittenden County Public Safety Authority Board meeting this morning. We are moving forward with selecting a consultant to come in and work through the last implementation stages and then stand up the organization with an executive director staff through the consultant for a couple of years. We anticipate executing that contract the beginning of November and coming back with a request for FY19 funding from reserve funds, reserve balance to support that work, as well as an FY20 ask. As you might remember, to get this off the ground, we'll be using the amount we're currently allocating to dispatch to operate it, but there is some initial capital and investment needs requested. So you will see that on a future council agenda as well. And those are my updates.
Can we address the door, please?
So
Can we have that door open?
we can with the school trustees meeting back there.
Okay, you know what,
That's-
we've got
we're
this
trying
one,
to
we're good.
prop
Okay,
them both open.
understood. Sorry. Habit. Okay, next up is council reports. I think we started down here last time, start this way.
I don't have anything to report this time.
I met with Jesse and Julie last week, I think it was, on the non-union wage plan that they're pulling together in final stages for. I think we're gonna hear about that later this month, or actually early next month at this point. And some other updates around the retirement fund transition and the contract with the police, so. Just part of the regular updates or time together in my liaison role there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My items are all actually on the agenda, so I think I'll punt. I'll talk about treasurer and UNB and all that good stuff later.
So the Public Safety Commission met, I believe it was last week. As I reported prior, they have lost a chair as well as some other commission members. So it's been challenging for the group to get together a quorum in the meantime. And then there's also been this ongoing discussion and difficulty, which I think we've heard from commission members and have also discussed amongst ourselves in regards to the charge, and if the charge of that commission being aligned and other commissions being aligned to operational aspects of the city's work presents difficulties, and kind of what that means for this larger policy vision and goal setting that we need our commissions to be doing. So there was a conversation, which of course there are parts of that conversation that are challenging in moving forward. Ultimately, the decision of the commission was to hold off on recruitment for the time being, while as we go down the road with the process that we discussed at our, I forget exactly what it was called, but our planning retreat, to kind of, if there is going to be alignment or a change in our commissions, it doesn't make sense to recruit new people to commissions that might be an entirely different shape sometime in the near future. I do believe that they decided they're still going to plan to meet, I think, in early December to provide some input on the budget process like our other commissions do. So I think they're going to work to be able to still maintain a quorum and meet at that time. But they also expressed, and I really want to pass on, they want to be really engaged in the discussions that we have and that our other commissions have in looking at our commission structure, and if there are changes that need to be made, and if so, what those changes are. And then I've been able to connect and talk with some folks, the mayor and town clerk for a city, Tacoma Park in Maryland, about non-citizen voting, which is on a little bit later tonight. So I guess we can talk about that then, but it was really enlightening and a great conversation.
Thank you.
That's what I've got.
So I attended the Public Works Commission meeting earlier this week.
Thank you.
Councilor Lott was not able to make it. She was at a conference, so I was there in her stead. There was conversation about the membership of the commission. They're down 2 members. 1 member just moved out of the area, and another has been unable to attend. And I think currently all of the commissioners have expired appointments, so there's probably a need for revitalizing that and getting everybody back on board officially. There was conversation about the Main Street and pool projects, and they're pretty excited that they're underway now with the design phase of that. Conversations and meetings have taken place with some of the utilities about cost sharing, going very well with Green Mountain Power. There was conversation about some capital projects, including the bridge work that's underway, and the East Allen traffic rerouting that's currently underway with that construction. There was also conversation about how the commission might better communicate its work to the community. And it sounds like they're going to have commissioners rotate, coming up with a 1 or 2 paragraph update on their work, so folks will understand the great work that they're doing. And lastly, there is underway an East Allen transportation scoping study, and that will involve a United Planning Work Plan, UPDW, working with CCRPC and VCHB as consultants. So I had my fill with the alphabet soup, how they meet and communicate. And the commissioners are considering being involved with the Technical Advisory Committee. So that will allow them to have input, and their goal is to have a plan for future improvements. So that was the gist of the meeting.
Thank you.
Sure.
And just a quick note in regards to one of those items too. We did set a meeting to follow up on the communications concepts and ideas, and there were some ideas shared back and forth between council and staff. I also just want to note that next Monday there's a housing commission meeting. If folks are interested in engaging on that, that'll be 6 o'clock here at City Hall. And also want to acknowledge Eric's work with planning commission as they move forward on the housing chapter and some other items this month. And as I promised, we're going to bring a kind of more comprehensive update on the master plan progress in the near future. I'll work with staff on that.
Can I just say, Seth sits on the Housing Commission. I'm an additional layer of
Participation.
But I have a work conflict next Monday, so if there's other counselors that have an interest in participating, I welcome you doing so, unfortunately.
Just one, please individually reach out to me.
Yes, right, please. Thank you. Otherwise it becomes a council meeting.
Okay. Any other items for council reports? So seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to tonight's regular items. First up is approval for an event on Hickok Street for a block party. It's spreading.
Okay, so staff has received an event permit application for a Hickok Street block party. This will be sponsored by the Winooski Police Department, and it's something they've done before on Hickok Street. The event includes a street closure on Hickok Street from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday, September 29th. The community is invited to join us there for a cookout with the police department manning the grill. So staff recommends approval of this community event.
You're gonna have to wear an apparatus for your beard, it's, the health
right.
office comes cheap. I'm just giving you a hard time, I'm sorry. Exciting that you guys are supporting this. Thanks for your work in this outreach to communities, the community policing model at work, right? And being out and engaging this way. So incredibly appreciative of all your work and time to make something like this happen, and for the department for being there. I know it means a lot to the community. Thank you. Yes?
We're on Hickok Street. I live on Hickok Street. Yeah. They're closing it at River, and I'm not sure how far the closure is. I'm hoping that Chief Hebert can fill in how far that closure will be.
We're gonna try and leave River Street open and block in front of Chase. But other than, once the bouncy houses get set up, we'll try and figure out a way to get people in and out.
You can bounce your way down the street. Cool. Great. Any questions for council? Any questions, comments, concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval of the event permit for the Hickok Street block party.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item B, approval of a treasurer appointment. So as noted, some items I work on are coming up. I come to today very disappointed in that we had received acceptance after a round of interviews. Just backing up from a public perspective, council authorized a group to go forward with posting and then interviewing treasurer applicants, and that was conducted. Interviews were done, and a finalist was selected. The finalist actually also accepted the position, so we have been working towards doing this final approval for the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately today, due to a professional conflict at their work, they've decided that they can no longer accept the position. So I come to you today very disappointed to say that as of this afternoon, our finalist that the committee had selected and put forth to you for consideration is no longer able to accept the position. The current plan is to have myself and Nicole reconvene with Jesse and the selection committee again and take a look at the other applicants that we interviewed and the other pool of applicants and decide whether or not going back out is the appropriate next step or action. There was another finalist, for example, in the mix for a while, so we've got some other things to consider there. So that was the planned next step of action, unless the council has any additional guidance or feedback in regards to that action plan. I'm hesitant to benchmark an exact date that we could have somebody else forward, just because that process could play out over some time.
No concerns from me.
Questions, concerns? No. Okay, so we'll reconvene and we'll report back as soon as possible in regards to where that item's at. Again, thought we had that one done finally, but unfortunately just changed today. Any questions or concerns from the public? Okay, so seeing and hearing none, that this is on as an approval item, so I will call. There's not a name to call for in terms of a motion of any kind, so we're going to move on with this item. Okay, item BC, which is on for approval tonight. Charter change to allow all resident voting and non-citizen voting with charter language and ballot resolutions.
Do you want me to?
That'd be great.
Excellent. So before you tonight, Bob DePalma is here as our city attorney. There are a number of items presented to you tonight in your packet, as requested at our last discussion. There is a memo from staff on operational impacts and, if implemented, what this would look like from a voter's experience. If you decide to move forward tonight, the required resolution that you would need to approve, actually announcing the intention to put it on the ballot and setting the public hearing dates. As requested, there's two different sets of charter chain languages, one with the allowance for all resident voting by itself, and one with the allowance for all resident voting and the protection of the voter checklist. So it's two different documents. And I will say in the back, there's also photocopies of the memo and the charter language for the public if you're interested in seeing that. And of course, it's posted online as well. And then finally, I did include a copy of the Winooski school charter as well, just for our reference. So that's what's before you. We're happy to talk through the operational impacts, talk through anything else you may have questions with, or simply answer questions.
So to reframe too, as the resolution does here, council in August opted for a schedule to pursue the potential ballot language and initiate the ballot process potentially. We approved a timeline. To review that this is kind of the next step where there's an actual vote that would move it towards the ballot. So prior to this discussion, in the last meeting, we had a review of the potential ballot language and some of the issues done by our attorney and also staff from an operational perspective. We received a memo outlining some of the legal questions, concerns, and items in the last meeting, and we asked for some feedback, some additional items to be followed up on and the city managers presented that information back to us. I'll also note an item that's not in here, and that is council expressed concern at the last meeting that that this impact or this item would also impact the school board of trustees, which elections. As we went back through, and that's provided for you here, the school district is deferential to the city's definition of what an eligible voter looks like, or not looks like, but who is an eligible voter. As a result of that, we reached out to the city, and by we, I mean, or to the school. I reached out, flagged this issue, explained the timeline, provided them with the dates in which the decision would be made, and offered for the solicitation of input, either formal or otherwise, from the district. The district, through the superintendent and the school board chair, declined to provide any input, and in a conversation, the basic reflection that I can give is that there was a sense that they did not have enough time to address this issue and take it up in a way that, from their perspective, was feasible, or at a pace in which they felt like they could provide any kind of definitive feedback. So that's a summary of that exchange in terms of us putting it out to the school board. So I want to add that in here for additional context, because I ran that communication versus the city manager doing this research. Okay, so I think there were a few items that council wanted to highlight from the last meeting in regards to what was being considered, both from the voting ballot language information, and also from I think those core pieces of the outcomes that are being proposed here for the intent of the charter change. And we've asked for this information back. So I think at this juncture, unless there's additional analysis or input that wants to come from either the legal side of things or city operational measures.
I don't think so. I mean, we're happy to talk through the documents if that's helpful,
Yeah.
or just respond to questions.
Okay. I think at this point, I'm inclined to ask you to maybe talk through some of the documents and why decisions were made in regards to specifically the proposed amendment document for starters.
Sure. Bob, can you walk through the two different versions of the actual charter? Is that's what you're talking about, Seth?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So as Jesse told you, you have two versions in front of you. They are identical except for one difference, which is some added language in one of them in section 19202. So both versions have four main sections, Romans 1, 2, 3, and 4. And sections 2, 3, and 4 in each version are the same. And those sections are just cleanup versions. They're really not substantive to the main issue that you're addressing, which is permitting non-citizens to vote. Those three sections contain changes to other provisions in the charter which reference the word citizens. And there was some feeling that that may create some confusion as to what citizens means. So in those three sections, we've changed the word citizens to either resident or person, depending on the context. And in each version that you have in front of you, those changes are identical. Section Roman numeral 1 is the main provision that you have in front of you. And in the first one in your packet, it contains the bare change, just changing the concept of who is an eligible voter within the city for municipal and town meeting elections. The second section adds a subsection D to this revised section 19202, and that subsection D incorporates very closely the provisions of Act 128 that was adopted by the Vermont legislature in this past session to provide some element of protection for the state voter checklist. And in this draft, we've opted to try to adopt those provisions as closely as possible, hoping that we can mirror whatever procedures the state puts in place with respect to the municipal checklist that we would be developing under this new regime.
If we could ask, is it, you say we hope that we would do this, and that's because we're not aware of what the mechanics of that are going to look like?
I'm not aware of that at the moment.
Okay.
And I think that there may be some serious questions as to how protective those provisions are, in large part because the provisions of Act 128 purport to restrict access of the database to certain agencies over which the state does not control.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not clear to me how those provisions will play out as they get implemented.
And is there an implementation timeline expectation from, that you can discern in any way, shape, or form, or was this essentially a legislative, something that was done without direct action correlated with the passing of legislation?
I'm not privy to that, so I don't know what the
Okay.
Secretary of State's office is doing right now about that.
I
Okay.
think it is in place. It just requires an affidavit that you're not one of, an individual that meets this criteria you're acting on behalf of. To my knowledge, somebody who fits that criteria has not requested the statewide voter checklist, but there is it is in law, and there's a practice in place.
So I don't think at the state level that process that Eric just outlined is very controversial. There may be some commercial users or commercial parties that would like to have access to the voter checklist that may feel some restrictions there. But other than that, there is, I don't see it as very controversial. With the version that's in front of you, there is a political element to the proposal that may take on more importance with respect to parties seeking access to the voter checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And to
Can
not
you-
speak in code,
Yes, could you be a little more clear about what you think that means?
what we're going to be concerned about is whether federal immigration authorities are going to want to have access to the city checklist. Just as an example, the city of San Francisco has just recently adopted a provision which permits non-citizens to vote in school board elections, only school board elections. And in the affidavit, the voter affidavit that is given to prospective voters when they enroll to vote, there is a notice at the top of the affidavit which reads, "Important notice for non-United States citizens. Any information you provide to the Department of Elections, including your name and address, may be obtained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and other agencies, organizations, and individuals." And it goes on to recommend that people reading this consult with immigration attorneys or other parties that protect immigration rights. So clearly that's, in this sort of setting, we're in a fairly politicized environment presently, and these are the kinds of things that you may want your voter registrants to be aware of if they're going to register to vote. And for that reason, the addition of this subsection D in this proposal creates issues, and I just don't know how they're going to play out.
Thank you.
So other than subsection D, I'll just walk through the particular provisions of the amendment to section 19202. Section A incorporates most of existing language, but it adds some additional language that makes clear that the qualifications for voters in municipal elections will be governed by subsection B in the section, whereas other provisions of state law regarding voter registration, absentee voting, and the conduct of elections generally will continue to be governed by what's called general law, which basically is the election law of the state of Vermont. Subsection B provides that for a person to vote in a city meeting or municipal election, that person needs to meet 3 requirements: is a resident of the city, is 18 years of age or older, and has taken the voter's oath. This is in distinction to existing state law, which requires, in addition to those 3 requirements, that the person be a citizen of the United States, a naturalized citizen. I want to highlight one provision, which is the requirement for residency. Residency is a defined term in Vermont statutes, and it means a natural person who is domiciled in this state as evidenced by an intent to maintain a principal dwelling place in the state indefinitely, and to return there if temporarily absent, coupled with an act or acts consistent with that intent. So for each registrant, it's a factual question as to whether that person satisfies this residency requirement. For the vast majority of people, it's a very simple question. You know, I live at 10 Main Street. Here, you know, here's my driver's license. Here's my utility bills, and I've been living there for 5 years. That's pretty simple. But for others, and especially in the context of this proposal, there may be some additional questions as to what residency means. And again, let me turn to the hot button issue, which is the immigration question. One of my partners, who is an immigration attorney, has told me that the only non-citizen who can legitimately claim a right to indefinite residency in the state or in this country is a person holding a green card. That persons who have other forms of permission to be in the United States, whether it's a student visa, an H-1B visa, a 1E visa, there's a whole variety of categories. Those who are here seeking asylum legitimately, all of those parties have a temporary right to be in the United States. And my partner suggested that, or questioned whether any of those parties who do not have a green card but are otherwise here legitimately have, as a matter of law, the right to remain indefinitely. So there's some questions about residency in the context of this immigration issue, which I don't think we can resolve, but I just wanted to point them out to the council so that you folks are aware of the issue.
Does this go back to we had a question at the last meeting about whether or not we would need to create potentially a new voter's oath or have 2 separate ones?
Yeah, and I think we came to the conclusion that one was not necessary because that voter's oath that's in place is applicable for all levels of election in the state of Vermont, including local elections. So we did not see the need to revise that.
I thought the conflict was that the voter's oath specifically references citizenship, does it not? No, I have it in front of me.
No,
I'm
it does
sorry.
not.
It does not?
No.
You'll act in good faith for the state of Vermont, like that.
Okay.
So what you're thinking of is we would need to create a Winooski form to register to vote.
Okay,
That
I'm
did
sorry.
not ask them to affirm citizenship status.
Oh.
So we would have a separate voter registration form, but the oath that they were attesting to would be the same.
Right, okay, so the oath itself isn't the issue, it's the mechanics of the registration form.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct. Well, I think, that's this, that definition of residency that is in state statute is vague and leaves that gray area that is at the crux of the discussion around students' right to register and vote as well. And the argument against allowing students who live and are residents of, say, Winooski, to be able to register and vote here.
That's where that battle has been traditionally fought, is over the question of students, college students.
I have a question, I don't know if it's for Carol or, but how do we affirm residency currently?
So currently, when they come in to register to vote, we ask them their name and we either ask for a driver's license or the last 4 digits of their social. If they have neither one of those two, we have to contact the Secretary of State's office.
And how does that link to residency in terms of the last 4 digits of the, I mean, do we then check up on
So once
folks?
we've added the person to the voter checklist, the driver's license has been verified and the social security number has been verified.
Okay.
But if somebody had moved and still had like a Rutland address, but had a Vermont driver's license, they wouldn't check for residency, that they
No.
just, oh, it would, okay.
But-
Right, the Vermont driver's license, the license number that you have will always stay with you. So if they move from Rutland to Winooski,
Mm-hmm. So,
So,
but,
but check for that is that at that, if, when I moved from Montpelier to Winooski, and I came here to register to vote, Carol went into the database, could find me, could pull me off the Montpelier list and put me onto the Winooski list.
right,
So you can't be registered to vote in more than one community. at
right,
one point.
you can only be a resident of one place at a time.
But it's
So
actually a
here-
lingering
Except those
issue.
people who voted in New Hampshire in the last election.
Yes, so is it more a function for voter checklist, like maintenance, so that we don't have duplicate all across the state?
There's a process by which that's reconciled with the Board of Civil Authority on a periodic basis where they can do a purge, essentially, where there are letters that go out, alert residents, you haven't voted here in a long time, and
the
flag it
last
to
two
them.
general elections.
Give them a chance to reactivate, which the ramifications of that are less now that people can do same-day registration, because we'll leave somebody out in the cold. We're trying to vote in that case.
So, in this new scenario where we have a municipal checklist then, and these folks are not registered, for state and federal elections, if they don't have a driver's license or a social security number, then what is there for them?
So the conversation we had internally, and that was outlined in the memo, is that we believe it's the intent of the council to limit barriers. So we would, for the municipal checklist, we would ask people to provide some documentation verifying their name and their date of birth. We don't currently ask for proof of residency, so we wouldn't ask for that for all residents. We really tried to stay with how are we treating people as equitably as possible. So we would ask for that proof of name and date of birth, the same way we ask for driver's license or social security number. But we would be very broad about how they provide that documentation. We purposely didn't list out a kind of documentation you have to provide, but that it could be broad. And that they would attest to the fact that they live in Winooski.
Thank you.
Other questions in this juncture for Bob in regards to what's been said so far? We're kind of going into the operational piece I was going to go to next, which is great. So.
I just had one more on the voter checklist stuff. In a conversation with someone at the Secretary of State's office, it's conveyed to me, it's my understanding that Act 128 does, and this was different than my initial understanding, the protections do apply to the municipal voter checklists. They can't be requested by federal agencies or designees thereof. The thing that's different is that it doesn't require the affidavit for somebody requesting a municipal checklist. So our language would only differ from state law, even though that's already technically true. Somebody can't request it if they meet those criteria, ideally, but we have no way of knowing that. This would just add that affidavit requirement. Is that, if that's true?
I can't answer that. I don't know what the state is requiring at the present time.
Okay.
And I think my question is more along the lines of, do our employees have the authority to deny the production of documents to the federal government if requested to produce documents?
It's a hot subject, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I worry about giving people a false sense of security if it doesn't actually, if we don't actually have the right to withhold documents.
So I think that the answer is that a municipal employee could not deny a federal agency information requested by it. Federal agencies have pretty broad investigatory powers, short of the right of subpoena and things like that. And I haven't researched this, but I suspect that most federal agencies have sufficient powers to have the right to demand and obtain information from municipal officers.
I do think it's interesting, even if
Thank you.
even if that were the case, I mean, there's nothing that we could do, even if somebody who doesn't meet that criteria could sign that affidavit, have the checklist, and hand it over to somebody else in a manila envelope. So I do agree that there's an inherent liability that someone would be taking to register and, you know, be a part of a voter checklist.
I think this is I quite frankly think that this is a issue that's born out of the subject and is not one that we have even vetted at the same amount and pace from a timing perspective as the broader issue, and expressed and have not had satisfied deep concerns over trying to overlay this act that doesn't appear to have clear implementation, doesn't appear to have clear, quite frankly, functional, I don't know, any kind of functional guidance given in terms of how it applies, or its efficacy in doing what it's intended to do. I walked away from our last conversation very concerned in getting the sense and research afterwards that there's a pretty broad belief that this was not necessarily an effective piece of legislation in terms of what it was hoped to do by advocates that supported it, but it was the best thing that could get done. And that's again concerning for me to have us throw that into this without really understanding how those pieces are going to fit together. That's
right. So remember, the baseline here is that voter checklists are public records under the Public Record Act.
right.
And although Section Act 128, I don't think purports to amend the Public Records Act, it will probably be construed as some partial exemption from the Public Record Act. But the contours of that and how it operates at this point is pretty much an unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to be operating first with that baseline that a voter checklist is a public record available for inspection by anyone for no reason.
I definitely hear what you're saying, Seth, and I think, you know, I do support inclusion of language. I understand where you're coming from. But I'm also okay with it not being in there. And that really came out of a result of that this is already technically, it's a protection that is technically already in place. It's just the affidavit, the addition of the affidavit that we would be adding to our process. But that said too, you know, I'm okay with moving forward without that, you know, with the first of the two, without that language. Although if there's support from other counselors, I would like to include it. I do think, irregardless of whether it's in there or not, for individuals registering, if this was passed, which is could be a long time down the road, there would be a liability. I like the idea of having some sort of, you know, warning language, or just a language that says voter checklists, municipal voter checklists are public records that could be accessed by individuals, and here's the type of information that would be included on it. Like, one of the biggest and most important things is that we're not asking or documenting what somebody's citizenship or immigration status is. So obviously you can't disclose what you don't have. So I think that that's critical. So this, you know, I like this language, but it's also not a lockbox. It's just another layer of protection. I also don't feel like it's 100% necessary in order to move forward. I do think there's an assumption of liability for some individuals in some way. But at the same time, my guess is even if we had the most iron defenses around access to the voters checklist, if somebody was undocumented, I don't even think that assurance would likely be enough for an individual to take the risk of registering to vote, which is unfortunate. But it's just, a likely reality. And I also think it was interesting in my conversation with the clerk and mayor in Tacoma Park, Maryland, which they've been doing this since the early 90s, so a really long time. And their checklists are entirely public records, can be requested. I think they only have that you have to be a registered voter in the state to request the checklist. But they have not had a single request from somebody who's not a campaign. So I did find that interesting in this heated political climate.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of if and maybes and possibilities to that. So that's interesting. I guess people will vote as to whether that's enough, again, to put it forward from a public policy standpoint. Other questions about the specific language that's here? Because I want to circle back just to summarize and touch on, because it's not in this item. I want to talk about Constitution piece and just summarize that in case there, especially if there are people joining us for the first time on this topic.
I don't have a specific question about that language, but I have a question about the school district charter language and how it connect, the school district charter language that we have, and whether, is that so, can I ask that now?
Yeah. We can go into that.
I'm not clear based on a read of the language whether trustees to the school board will now be eligible to be non-citizens, or whether state law that applies to election of school board members applies. Have you looked at that, Bob?
I have not. I can.
I don't want you to do it on the fly. I think that's to me, if we have two municipal bodies, one, it's not, I see a lot of references to the petition. So nominations for the office of trustee shall meet the made by petitions and meet the requirements of section 7 of the charter of the city. But I don't see anything about either nominations for trustee or trustees themselves that would have Title 16 not apply. So I think having different bodies with different folks eligible to run is a question that deserves further exploration.
I think we brought this up last time about even our own seats, or like the city's municipal seats, if they would be, if like this change would make them available to non-citizen residents.
I believe the answer to that question would yes. It's not clear to me what the answer to the question is in the school district context, because the references within the charter to the city charter speak more to the who's eligible to sign the petition, not who's eligible to run for office.
And the Australia ballot piece instead of in section 7. Okay.
Yeah. But I think if there are other parts of state law that do apply, we could fix that with our charter.
We don't fix that with our charter. The school district addresses it in their charter. That's how it works.
And again, just for context, indication was this is not an issue that they're going to take up now or on this timeline in terms of November, just to be clear.
Right.
So that's not something that I think that there's been. I would also say
so my point is, it's not a seamless transition where we don't even really need to worry about the school district side of things. I think there are issues impacting the school district that have not been, certainly haven't been discussed by the school board, but they've not been analyzed by either our attorney or the school district's attorney. That's my point, sorry.
Nope.
And one complication there is that the school district charter references provisions of the Winooski City Charter that are no longer in effect.
Yeah.
When the Winooski City Charter was amended in 2013, I think it was, the existing references in the school board charter weren't reviewed and updated to conform to the new Winooski City Charter. So we've got some references there that are obsolete, and the question is, so now what parts of this Winooski City Charter in fact do apply to the school district. I think there's an answer to that, but you've got to wend your way through a couple of legal doctrines to get there.
I would defer to your legal expertise, but they probably have their own attorney too.
Yeah, it's not something that I want to opine on for the
No,
school board.
and I want to make really clear, walking out of this room, is that we won't be rendering a legal opinion for the school on this issue in any way, shape, or form. I think the questions here are only for context, in the fact that there's recognition that whatever the city does in our charter, because the school cross-references it, has an impact on the way that their voting works and potentially on office holders. Okay. Since we went into the school charter, any other school district items? Okay. I'm wondering and this is kind of putting on the spot, I'm wondering if we can do just a very succinct summary in regards to the discussion, just to crystallize it in regards to constitutional challenges that we discussed last time in terms of the process by which there could be a constitutional change, but that there being some uncertainty there, leaving it.
Well, so the bottom line is that there is sufficient uncertainty as to the effect of the constitutional provision that we don't know whether our Vermont Constitution will be interpreted to permit non-citizens to vote until our Supreme Court answers that question. There are arguments on both sides. I think there's a good argument that the Constitution does not prohibit non-citizens from voting. It certainly gives a constitutional right to those who are citizens, who are residents, who are over 18 and who give the oath. That those, if you check off those boxes, those parties clearly have a constitutional right to vote. Whether the legislature has the power to expand that box is an open question. There are some commentators who would say that the language of our Constitution opens the door for that, but there's no clear answer until we get an authoritative view. So I don't think I can say that the Constitution is so clear that the City Council is prohibited from moving forward on this path, but I don't know if someone challenges that question would not prevail before the Supreme Court.
And can you ask, so because if we were to move this forward, and then if voters were to move it forward and go to the legislature, if the legislature were to pass it, at those different stages, are there different actors that are liable for, defending against a legal challenge? In that case, does that change as it goes down the process, or is it always us?
Well, so, I mean, the city is always going to be a party to that because it's the originator of the proposal. If the legislature does adopt the provision, then an aggrieved party would make the state of Vermont a defendant in the case, and the Attorney General's office would be called upon to defend the position of the legislature and the constitutionality of the enactment. I think we discussed last time, I assume that before the legislature got to the point of approving this, it would have solicited the opinions, at least from the Attorney General's office, if not from other parties that play a role in drafting legislation.
Thanks.
Go ahead, sorry.
We also discussed, though, that we can't control when a citizen files suit. So a citizen could file suit before it even gets to the legislature. So if the measure is approved in November, a citizen could file suit, and then the city of Winooski would be the sole defendant in that scenario.
That is correct.
One question that's come up from some public comment too is, can you address in any way, shape, or form what the exposure or potential liability from a legal perspective for the city may or may not be in this? And I'm just gonna summarize what I think, and folks are welcome to make adjustments to that if you've perceived it differently. I think the bottom line answer is unknown. That because of the nature of the issue, it certainly, we'll say, invites opportunities potentially for either organizations, individuals, or interested entities with an opposite perspective of this proposal to file suit. And just generally, the city is then required to very responsibly defend itself. And what that may or may not look like, there's not some pending suit that we're aware of. We have not received any communications that we're aware of that an organization said we will do this as a result of you doing this. So I think that's where we stand in terms of potential legal liability. Is certainly see the potential for it because of the nature of the issue. Don't necessarily have clarity around maybe each of the legal points in regards to what somebody could or could not argue effectively against it. And probably reasonably, regardless of how much time we're spent or not spent on this issue, would likely never get to a place of being able to definitively put that into a box. Because again, as Bob indicated, that's until the Supreme Court makes that decision, we don't know. But want to make clear that we have acknowledged the fact that there is the potential for that commitment, that liability, and the responsibility of the city to defend itself on a policy that's put forward. Anybody have anything that thinks I'm stating correctly?
No, I just question came to mind, if that were the case, would that impede the legislature's involvement in this process? Would that throw that timing off in any way? Or would that just proceed?
It would depend on if the court intervenes based off of a motion to stay the legislation, and I don't even know how they would intercede.
Yeah, I don't think that a court would interfere with the legislative process.
Yeah.
My guess is that the legislature, this is a judgment call on my part, but I would think that the legislature would be very reluctant to move forward with the legislation while that issue is being adjudicated by the courts. It would want to see how ultimately the Vermont Supreme Court would decide that issue. That would seem to be the most conservative approach that the legislature could take in that setting.
Do you think conversely a court might say this is a non-issue and we're going to wait to hear this until the legislature decides whether or not this even exists?
That is a possibility. Then the legislature is in a sort of an awkward position. It's got a lawsuit sitting out there. Is it going to act in the face of that lawsuit or not? I'm not quite sure how legislative leaders would view proceeding in the face of that. It's a possible outcome.
Sounds all very hypothetical. There's a lot of different potentials.
Is the issue ripened?
Well, I mean, it's just important for everybody to keep in mind, just because the community approves a charter change, doesn't mean the legislature has to do one thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
It can sit on the wall,
Yeah.
and if there's any sort of legal liability associated with it, that makes one bit harder to get it off the wall. That's just.
I mean, one way to defend against a suit that was brought immediately after November 6th is to argue to dismiss the case because, as you say, that it's a moot point at this point because all the city has done is ask the legislature to do something. And until the legislature does something, there's no impact
Right.
from the action of the city voters.
Right.
That's one possibility that would cut off that lawsuit until the legislature takes it further. But we're dealing in hypotheticals here, and I don't know how a court
Right.
would react to that.
Mm-hmm.
What else in regards to the charter change language and the school piece? And we've kind of thrown in what's the legislative process or concerns there. Because Justin and I just want to walk through any operational items, including expenses and comments that are in there next, so you can be thinking about that.
Before we get to that, so you were talking about legal exposure, which was in the document as like unknowns. There was also a line there about federal government interpretation in the list of unknowns. So I wanted to hear more, and for folks at home, what that means.
So the reason I included that is, you know, I think we're in a political place where the federal government may not look kindly upon this action, and we have we get support from the federal government in a lot of ways. For example, we have a build grant into them now for millions and millions of dollars, and we just have we don't know what the political read of this action might be on those dollars. And there has, to my knowledge, there has been no withholding of funds for an action like this. It is a complete unknown.
But in a competitive grant process, they're not bound, it's not like, the other, you know, the funds that go to the police department, where it's an allocation that sort of is guaranteed according to a formula, that there's really no room for judgment on the part of the federal government versus grant making process. I think there's a fair amount of discretion in terms of what gets funded and what doesn't.
Right, and so the, you know, the funding part is one side. You know, we have seen in other communities where political actions have led to ICE raids. I think that's also an unknown. You know, I think that's got to be balanced with giving access. You know, you know, we've talked before about words matter, actions matter. So what's that balance? Are we is opening the door, the community value more than the risk we might put some of our residents in? We don't actually know what our population here is. Anecdotally, I think we know that most of our population is here in some kind of appropriate legal status, so should not be concerned, but it's a scary time for people who don't look like me.
Just are you aware of the city taking any actions to reach out to, I'm just not, or to reach out to the New American community to ask for their input or thoughts on this from a logistical standpoint or otherwise? Are you aware of any efforts to do that?
We as city staff have not done that yet,
Okay.
because we don't know how this is moving forward.
Okay.
I mean, we should be aware that there's a lawsuit presently pending against the U.S. government over its efforts to include a citizenship question on the 2020 census form. And there is at least the argument being made by those opposing that action that even asking that question raises real risks as to whether the census will be accurately conducted. So it sort of plays into the questions that you're asking.
Going back to the funding thing, well, that seems clearly a likely scenario of, maybe not likely, but a possible scenario of like penalized grant review. Is that technically legal?
Not quite sure how to answer. I mean, clearly we have heard threats from the Justice Department that it is going to take actions against cities that have enacted what the Justice Department views as sanctuary city laws. Now, this is not that, but it certainly does give you concern as to what strategies the federal government might deploy in this environment. Again, it's all an unknown.
With that, you said you've heard in regards that there have been those threats in regards to sanctuary city status. Are you aware of any or have heard any either legal or other implications for the 12 municipalities that have non-citizen voting, or any pushback from the federal government or ramifications for those cities?
I only know what we've all read in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And have any of those happened in the last 18 months?
San Francisco is really new.
Have we undergone a comprehensive legal review of potential cases? I mean, I guess that's the other question. I understand we know what we don't know, and we know what we do know, but do we know what we don't know in terms of cases that might be out there? We haven't done that.
I have not talked to any other communities about who've adopted this, about if they've experienced any funding reductions.
Or legal challenges in general.
I think that would be so state by state dependent, because there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that prohibits. It just comes down to state constitutions. So legal challenges would probably be very different than ours, because our Constitution is different than those states.
Additional questions on the language, the charter for the school, the constitutional process, the legislative issues, or legal challenges? Okay, I think now it would be good just to walk through the operational points of the memo.
Sure.
Bob, thank you.
So I'll walk quickly through this. So staff wrote this from the perspective of if this change is implemented, how would our practice be impacted, and what would residents experience? And this memo is in the back with the 2 charter changes if people want to read it in depth, also on the website. So as I mentioned before, we would create a new Winooski specific voter registration form that individuals who would fill out if they weren't filling out the statewide form. The big difference there being a citizenship status or non-citizenship status. We would try and mirror it as closely as possible. As I said earlier, our value trying to interpret how this would be implemented was to treat all residents of Winooski as equitably as possible. So how we would actually administer this, and Carol, please feel free to jump in, is we would maintain 2 voter registration lists. We would maintain a Winooski municipal voter registration list that was comprehensive of all residents, citizens and non-citizens eligible to vote in the city of Winooski. And then we would maintain a state and federal voter registration list through the state Vermont election management system. So municipal list is comprehensive, state and federal is only citizens. And it outlines there what we would track in both of those systems. We would use our existing NEMRIC database, which is our financial and data collection tool, to build that municipal voter registration list. Also, I do want to just note here, in the last sentence of the paragraph on municipal voter registration, we say we're going to track citizen and resident status. Eric brought up a good suggestion as we're trying to get away from the use of citizen, that we could change that language to eligible for local elections, eligible for state and federal elections, just so we're being as clear as we can be. So on election day, how we anticipate this being implemented is that we will, from moving forward, always have a municipal ballot and a state and federal ballot if there's a state and federal election at the same time. So for example, town meeting day, there's often not a state and federal election, so we would only need the 1 municipal ballot. But if there is questions on multiple levels of government, we would always have a local ballot. So for example, JPs would be moved to a local ballot. We would also have to run local primary ballots as JPs run on a party basis. So a resident walks into the voting booth, they're welcomed by the election greeter. The election worker identifies their name on the list, sees which elections they're eligible to vote in, either gives them 1 ballot or 2 ballots. The cost implications for this, we recommend that moving to all local ballots, there's about a $900 per ballot cost to print ballots. So as we have, and that will differ year to year depending on how many elections we run, et cetera, but there would be that added cost, $900 per additional ballot. And then we are recommending that we currently operate our elections with 6 election workers, and we're recommending to double that, which is about a cost of $1,000 an election. Simply because right now the election workers work in teams, one checking off the list and one handing the ballot. And as we're going to have to make decisions which ballot, in each individual case, which ballots each person gets, we want to just be sure we're protecting the accuracy of that election, and providing more support to do that. So at the end of the election day, how this would work is we would take that Winooski municipal voter registration list that had the 2 columns of eligible for local elections and eligible for state and federal elections. Each election worker would tally the numbers, and those numbers would be balanced against the number of ballots cast. So we would maintain that checks and balances of, okay, we had 100 people take out local ballots, we've got 100 in, we had 90 take out state and federal ballots, and we have 90 in. So we always need to have that parallel counting to ballots, the ballots to those who took ballots. And then, as Christine started talking about, we've listed some unknowns there. This is an emerging, innovative thing, so I'm sure there are things here we have not thought about yet, but this is what we were able to put together in the last couple of weeks. One example that just came to me today after we published this was, Winooski is a member of several regional governments, including the Champlain Water District, the Chin County Public Safety Authority, Chin County Solid Waste that have bonding authority. When they bond, those go to the local voters. So we'd have to go back to look at each of those charters to see if those would qualify as municipal ballots or state and federal ballots. And if they qualify as municipal ballots, does that mean that Winooski's weighing in a different way than our surrounding communities are weighing in? And that is, quite frankly, just research we have not done yet. I mean, those are answerable questions, we just have not gotten there yet. I think those are the highlights from the operation perspective. Anything significant, Carol, I missed? No?
Questions, comments, concerns in regards to the operational accounting? First of all, thank you very much for putting all this work and time and effort into, in a short time span, to put all these, to put this together in the most thoughtful way. And you can see that it's evolved each time you've brought it back in terms of the concerns, possibilities of what would be necessary and needed. So thank you very, very much for all the time and effort and energy that went into that. Appreciate it. And again, just to give you all a plug, you're the silent heroes of this community. People don't know what it takes to pull off an election day and make it go so smoothly like you do each and every year, and we're so appreciative of the work that's done to do that, so thank you very much. Okay, questions, comments, concerns on the operational portions of the memo from council?
I just wanted to echo that thanks, because there's also been a lot of change in our elections recently between same-day voter registration and the implementation of two-factor authentication. So I just really want to thank you for all of the work that you do on our elections, and I know this would be something additional in that the list of changes that have been passed down from the state if we move this forward. But thank you so much for putting all the thought into what I think is a really good framework for a process that we could communicate to voters if we decide tonight to move this forward.
Any operational questions?
Yeah, so you guys have indicated that you can build a new list. So we have like the state-based list, right? And that exists, so like existing registered voters don't need to do anything new. And then you can build a second list to include these other folks that are just doing locally. But that cost estimate is actually not included here. Is that right? Okay.
That's a staff time and capacity impact. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we did have that conversation, and I think at this point, we feel like, at least initially, that's work we can do within our current staff capacity.
Okay.
It's really ensuring that, well, one, making sure we have ballots, and then two, ensuring that the elections run smoothly is really the important part.
And do you think that like the doubling of staff, would that be necessary from here on out, or is that something that you start with because of the changes and then potentially back
Well, I
off?
think that it's gonna double in staff when there's a primary and a general election, when there's two elections that are involved between state and local.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments, concerns from council in regards to process questions? After this, I think it's appropriate, given we've kind of walked through the main points of this, to turn it back to the audience to see if there's questions, comments, concerns from the public on the item. So I want to give you another shot if you've got anything to wrap up with the city manager and city's attorney. After the public comments, we'll turn it back towards council to consider any final thoughts, communication, and potential motions. Okay.
I did. So the school district ballot questions would be on the local ballot?
Yes.
And so if a citizen is going to vote on state, federal, and local questions, are they given 2 ballots, or does the state and federal ballot include all local questions?
They would be given 2 ballots. We
Would
would
it-
always have a local ballot and a state and federal ballot. And what we learned was that our ballot reader can be programmed for 2 simultaneous ballots, so they'd all go into the same place, but there would be 2 different ballots. So citizens, if they wanted to vote in all elections, would fill out 2 ballots.
What about the infamous, shall the community accept federal funds?
Didn't think about that one. I mean, it's a local decision whether we're accepting them.
But is
But
there
I
a
think
qualification and voter requirement on behalf of the federal government to authorize that?
I don't know. We have not looked into that.
You would need to look at each of the statutes, which is the source of the funding.
Okay. We will have a chance to re-engage if necessary, so this isn't the last call. I just want to open up the public and get those comments, thoughts, questions, concerns, see what we're not thinking about. So at this point in time, we're going to open up the floor for questions, comments, concerns to council. Just remind folks, generally it's a packed agenda tonight, so we appreciate if folks can try to stay in the range. If you've got comments of 3 minutes, we're not going to be quick with the buzzer. If you go a little bit over, that's okay. Also, please remember to address council, and that means, no turning around to your neighbors and having those conversations here. You're welcome to in the parking lot or the back, but for this purposes, please direct those comments, concerns, and questions towards the council. And with that, we'll open it up for comment. We've got a microphone right there. We won't ask that folks come up. We do appreciate if you could please state your name clearly as you begin to speak. Just raise your hand, we'll call on you. Yes, sir.
Does it just say right there? Yeah. Gotcha. My name is John Slinkman, resident of Winooski. I live down on Winooski Falls Way. I think you may know my wife, Lauren Sampson, who I think has been here to speak with y'all before about this measure. Lauren's my wife. I think she's a fantastic person. She's a Canadian citizen. We are going through an extended process of trying to allow her to become an American citizen. As you all know, that is a fraught task in these times. I know that one of the arguments against this is that people should earn their keep. They need to go through that process, but honestly, who knows how long that will take. It used to be a matter of a month before you knew, and we have been waiting for quite some time. Frankly, Lauren is a more impressive citizen than I am. She serves on a number of boards, too many to list. I participate on the Winooski Restorative Justice Board. She does that. She does COSA. She does Library Committee. She does Planning Commission. I think I'm forgetting a few. The only thing that she can't do that I can do is vote, and it would mean quite a bit to my family personally if that were allowed. I think there are a bunch of things to say about the, more generally about this proposal. I hear a lot of, I don't know, I would almost say, I understand the desire to move conservatively and make sure that we have checked all boxes. But it also feels a little like we're afraid to make a stand for something that is right. This is not a matter of citizenship. This is a matter of democracy. And voting in local elections, these are people who, I understand the argument that maybe students shouldn't be allowed for the same reasons. But the fact of the matter is they are. And the street that I live down on is filled with students and young professionals who can prove that indefinite desire to stay here no more than any any non-citizen resident can. And yet they're allowed to vote on things that affect them, and people who are here for 20 years, 30 years are not. And I mean, at some point, it's a matter of fairness, it's a matter of justice, and it's a matter of literally small d democracy. And so I would encourage all of you to support this, if for no reason other than that. All the other stuff, we can deal with that when it comes. But for now, just take a stand and do what's right. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Yes, sir.
Excuse me, George Cross. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. First of all, I want to mention that the memo that was prepared by the city clerk's office and the city manager's office is an excellent document that outlines all kinds of issues. And I would like to take just a second to quote from that document on the section that's called unknowns. Other details, I won't bother going all out, you've read it. Legal exposure. Federal government interpretation, particularly this federal government, I might add, parenthetically. New translation expectations, which you didn't speak about, but it's possible, I would assume from that question, is do we need to have the ballot in a number of different languages so that everyone, in fact, can exercise their right? Tonight I learned, thanks to the mayor, that the school board has decided to say we don't have enough time to do this. We don't even have time to think about it. And so they have not done that. We've also heard a number of items from the attorney dealing with the unknowns, but expanding on those unknowns. I don't understand the rush. There's another election coming in March. Nothing's going to happen, by the way, between November and March that puts this thing in place before the March elections. It's just not going to happen. The fact of the matter is that, from my perspective, the city council ought to pause, maybe even establish a committee that includes new Americans as well as citizens who've been here for a while, and to discuss all the things that you've discussed tonight, so that everyone in the community knows about all these things. And then, if it's decided that it should be on the ballot, put it on the ballot. Put it on the March ballot. It can be on any ballot. It doesn't have to be on a November ballot. That would give your attorney time to research some of the questions that he's raised this evening, give your city manager the opportunity, city clerk the opportunity to think about some of the problems and how they might be resolved in the issue. But to simply put it on the ballot, for Winooski to be the first and to absorb all the costs that come with being the first doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Because there will be costs at every step of the way. There will be costs associated with putting it on the ballot. There will be costs associated with going to the legislature. There will be costs when the legislature decides they're not going to do anything about it. As Nicole said, it's put it on the wall. Been there many times. So I urge you to pause, create a committee of citizens to really look at this thing, hear the same arguments you've heard this evening, and then when the time comes, if it's decided that it's a good idea to put it on the ballot, to put it on the ballot in March or even the next March, whenever it is. It's important that we understand what the impact is on the school district as well as on the city. I point out again, they're two separate municipalities, two separate charters. And they have to be a part of this. They can't be left with, we don't know what's going to happen, because they're in the same process you are, putting together a budget to be voted on in March. Well, if they've got to add to their legal fees to be able to overcome the obstacles that you've put in their way, then all you've done is added to their problem. There's no reason to do that. There's no hurry. We can do this. We can work it out. We can figure it all out one time or another. If you are going to put it on the ballot, I would urge you to divide the warrant, the section, into two parts, so that one section deals with non-citizen voting, the other section deals with the change of citizen to resident. Because you already have non-citizens serving on a variety of committees. And so that should be cleaned up in your charter, regardless of what else you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Public comment. Yes, sir.
Hey, Aaron Lipman. I already talked to you about why I support all resident voting, so I'm not going to repeat myself. I want to share a more personal take. I bought a house in Winooski earlier this spring, and I was voting last month as a first-time homeowner, and I got a little emotional just reflecting on how proud I am to live here, and what a vibrant democracy we have. And I want to expand that by inviting all of my neighbors to vote in local elections. There are a lot of unknowns here. We can't control what the legislature is going to do, what the VT Supreme Court is going to do, what the federal government is going to do. But we can only do what we think is right to build the community that we want to live in. And that's what I ask you all to think about tonight when we vote on whether to move forward with this. Every step towards social progress always comes with somebody or some group of people having the courage to take that step. And I want that to be our city tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Brian Meyer. I live on Main Street here in Winooski. I want to speak not just in favor of allowing non-citizen voting for residents of Winooski, but also for putting it on the November ballot. Countless studies have shown that voter participation is much, much higher and therefore more representative of communities when issues are placed on ballots that coincide with general elections. So I believe pushing it to a March ballot would make it less representative of the wishes of the community. And I wanted to just say I echo the points in favor of allowing non-citizen voting. If folks live here, pay taxes here, support the community, work every day to make it a better city, I believe they should be allowed the right to express that form, their opinions in the form of voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Margaret Ticehurst. I'm an American citizen. I just want to say that I know the city is trying to be something special. You are special. You're special to every citizen that lives in this city. You don't have to do it by trying to make new ways for our country. The country was founded on voting for American citizens. I have nothing against people that are not American citizens. And I know how hard it is for someone with a green card to get to be an American citizen. That's part of what America is. It's even harder for refugees. And I'm sure it's difficult for anyone that wants to become an American citizen. But it's worth the fight. You are making it easy for them to settle in and say, I don't have to do anything. I can vote. What will it be next? Are you charting a course that other cities will be following? Are you trying to be the first to initiate this? You're following California. What is our connection with California? We're a little city, 1 square mile. We're proud of it. We've welcomed every type of person that has come here. We've opened our hearts to all of them. We're not cruel. We're not biased. We're open-hearted people. I've lived here all my life. born here. My mother earned her citizenship. My grandmother and grandfather earned their citizenship. I guess I have to change it now. I mean American citizen. You can't always try to move forward on minority wishes. The majority usually is what follows. We, the majority, have the vote. And it's not that I have anything against anyone, but it is something that this city should have given much more thought to and much more care of their citizens than to move out with unknown to anyone and see it. Did you see that? They're doing this without even letting us know. You began it the wrong way, but I hope you don't end it the wrong way. Think this out, as George said. Step back 2 steps. Try to understand what America is and what America citizenship stands for. Yes, I know it's difficult. They serve on boards, they vote, I mean, they pay taxes. I understand all that. But you can't start by making this our law and hoping other cities will do the same thing. It's not right. And I know in your hearts, you know it's not right. We should keep our voting to American citizens. And I hope you do give it some more thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am?
I know.
Former
Says the deputy mayor.
Sally Tipson,
Grand Pumpkin.
been here for a few years. I want to thank you folks for all the work you've put into this so far. And I'm here to say I'm not opposed to this whole thing. I agree with George, slow down, there's no rush. I've heard a lot of words tonight, probably, maybe, could, might. Those are words that perhaps if a group were to study the whole issue for a little while, that some of that may become clearer. I think it would give time to perhaps educate the citizens, because some of the comments that are being made on Front Porch Forum are rather unkind. I think maybe with a little more education, people knowing what you're talking about, instead of, oh my God, what's going on in Winooski, we can't do this. Let's step back, take time. One of the other things that bothers me a bit is it's causing a little diversity. And it seems like of late we don't need another topic to separate the city. We've had F-35s, we've had Main Street revitalization, we've had the Main Street pool issue, we've had topics on the parklet. Let's come up with something that we can unite the city again. I'm thinking pumpkins maybe in October, we could do something like that. But again, thank you for your work. I hope you will step back, take time. It's a really serious thing, and do your best. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments from the public? Yes, sir.
Making us come up. Last time I
It's up to you
hit it
guys.
back. This is very, very difficult for me, again, same as just a couple of weeks ago, only slightly more married, to come up here and say this again, because I support this goal. I've worked towards this goal when I was on the council, but you got to slow down, and you don't have to fill all the boxes, but you got to fill a lot of the boxes. And it's clear again tonight that honestly, there are just more questions than answers, and that's just because it's just a big issue, and your staff has 900 other things that they need to be doing, and you're pushing them too hard, and honestly, I'm afraid you're going to push some of them out the door. Not because they disagree with you on the issues, but because it's a limited staff here. This is in Burlington. You're asking questions like, what's the legislature going to do? Who's reached out to legislative leadership? Who's reached out to the AG's office, the governor's office, the lieutenant governor's office? There are answers out there. So I just hope that you take it back and you not take it all the way back, that sounds wrong, but move forward at the appropriate pace. Make sure that you're doing this the right way. So, that's all.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, concerns from the public?
I assume we're not allowed to make multiple comments.
If it's a short one, that's okay.
This was actually on my original list, but I'm not a public speaker, so I'm John Slinton. I was just up here. I want to highlight the issue of welcoming and being a welcoming community. And for better or worse, this subject is here now. We are dealing with it. And this is not going to be a welcoming community if we step back and say, no, we're too afraid to do it. That is something that I have heard everybody here say we aspire towards, but saying this is not the way, that is not a step towards being a welcoming community. And I think you will see a very strong negative reaction from your fellow residents if you step back in fear for that very reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, concerns? From the public? Going once. Going twice. Okay. We'll now turn back towards council with any final questions for staff. Legal counsel, any comments, questions leading up to a motion? So I will open the floor, councilors.
I have a clarifying question for Bob. If this measure is not on the ballot this November, and because of the potential implications for a constitutional amendment or change, would it then be set back another 4 years in order for the process to, if we don't get it through this window?
Not 4, but 2.
2.
The amending provisions in the Constitution permits you to propose a constitutional amendment only in odd number biennium. So I would interpret that to mean that if they don't do it in 2019, they would have to do it in 2021. However, as I've looked at the amendment to this provision that we're looking at, it was done beginning in 2008. I'm wondering if the Constitution or the legislature interprets the constitutional provision as permitting them to bring forward a constitutional amendment at any point during the time in any biennium. So I would say that the maximum delay is to the beginning of the 2021 biennium, but perhaps they may feel the license to bring an amendment forward at any time during this upcoming biennium, which begins January 7, 2019. And if they do that, it is a process where now they have to wait till the next biennium. If it's approved in this current biennium, then they have to wait till the next biennium for the legislature to approve it again, and then it's put on the ballot for the voters. So it's basically a 3-year process.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? So if what we talked about at the last meeting was requesting that the legislature change the Constitution to remove that language, which is not something that we have prepared to be before you tonight. Is that official request from you for that constitutional change? That doesn't require the same public vote, the same vote of the public, so you could do that at any time. And my interpretation of it when we looked at it before was that it could be any time during the first session of the biennium. So if this went forward in March and therefore went to the legislature in March, that would count as part of the first session of the biennium.
Yes, that is correct.
So it's not November or 2 years, it's, you know, before the end of this session, or 2 years, right?
That is
Is that a different way to say it?
Okay.
Provide your options.
And again, that's initiated by the legislature. The city council can adopt a resolution urging the legislature to do that, but it must be initiated in the Senate by a senator and then brought forward from that point forward.
Okay.
So it's a whole different process than the charter amendment process.
So I think I've spoken at length, obviously, about how I support us moving this forward. So I won't delve into my reasons for why I think this is right for our community in depth, just that I think it is incredibly important we ensure that all of our community members, all of our residents who are just as invested in the future of Winooski as the 5 of us sitting up here have the opportunity to participate in local decision-making alongside us. One of the things that really resonated with me hearing some of the public hearing comments tonight was in regards to whether or not to move forward with a November or March election. I think, you know, listening to comments within these chambers tonight and comments I've had outside of our community on either side, it is a really big and important decision for our community. And I think we have a responsibility to our voters and to our residents to allow people, the most number of community members, to weigh in on that important decision making. And I think I would really struggle putting this before voters in March when we have, you know, 10 to 20% voter participation, as opposed to a November election where we can ensure the most number of people in our community have an opportunity to consider this for, and the implications of it for our community. And, you know, in regards to a lot of the maybes and ifs, I don't think even if we were 7 months or 5 months, 7 months, 3 years, 5 years later down the road and still having this discussion, we would be any closer to definitive answers on the majority of those maybes, ifs, etc. I think this is a discussion that has gone on for a long time in our community. We just heard that it was something that was discussed and a previous counselor was interested in moving forward at the time. So it has been discussed prior, and from what I've heard from people in the community is that they're ready to vote on this, that they're interested one way or the other in whether or not this is the direction our community would take. So I'm strongly interested in moving it forward, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Go in a row. You know, I think something that's been really clear from the beginning for this body is, and I won't speak for everybody here, I'll say for myself, I'm philosophically aligned in support of all resident voting. I think it's something, I expressed my support for it when we had a charter change committee and expressed my interest in looking at it. We deal a lot with comments about the speed and pace at which government makes decisions and acts. And I know coming from the outside, I certainly came into this position and role in a representative space as an elected official with a sense of urgency and desire to see the changes that I felt strongly about in the community take place as quickly as possible. It took me a few stumbles, bumps, and bruises, and in my opinion, some negative effects on the community to recognize that there's a process that has to take place in a community for big decisions. We're not an election. It's not about getting the most votes. We're put in these positions and these seats, not just to represent the people who voted for us, who are going to vote in favor of the policies that we put forward, the budgets we put forward. We're putting these seats to try to represent the entire community, including the people who are going to vote against the things we put forward. And to me, that's really important because it means it takes time and it takes a process for the community to be able to unpack something. And I think references to the Main Street or pool vote is unfolding quickly, quite frankly, are somewhat laughable. We've been working on Main Street for 10+ years. It's been a process that was envisioning for 15+ years. From the pool perspective, we've been engaged in replacement conversations for the last 6 years, including an active committee for the last 3. It's not just our responsibility, in my mind, to make the right decision. It's our responsibility to do it the right way. I've been really proud in my time serving Winooski about the way we've made decisions and the way we've moved forward and the support that we've gotten back from the community, because I feel like there's been support for the way that we've done that. I have never been more disappointed than to sit here today and have a conversation about something where we haven't even engaged one of the public bodies in the school district on this issue that it represents in such a direct manner. That to me is just 100% completely unacceptable. I'm also really disappointed in the fact that we're sitting here today with not a single member of the New American community sitting in the audience. And to my knowledge, we've done nothing to interact with that portion of our community about this issue, and especially about a number of the procedural items around that, how we can best support this in being successful. It's great to philosophically want something. I want something here. I would love to see this be accomplished. It's another thing to have your ducks in a row from an operational, legal, and structural perspective to know that you know what you're making a decision on, and I don't feel like we've had enough time to do that. From a technical perspective, just the subsection D128 enforcement issues, the definition of what the intent of the residency definition looks like, the green card issue, what documentation is going to be required for proof of residency or address, the constitutional provisions, the liability and court issues, the process uncertainties that, quite frankly, I think have been called together as quickly as possible, and I appreciate the presentation. I feel like I could have asked about 1,000 more questions on that, and that there are a number of holes on there that it's just not even fair to try to do right now. And then the plain simple fact that we haven't reached out to our legislative body. We have not reached out in any way, shape, or form to the governor's office that I'm aware of, or any of our senators. We had one House of Rep come in for one of the first meetings and give some thoughts on it. So for me, those are huge overarching concerns. And I very much respect the idea of this is the right thing to do, and therefore you should do it. And I think that that's a great thing from a philosophical approach and perspective. It's our job to make unpopular decisions sometimes, to do it the right way and to do it in the right manner for the community. And I think we can give Winooski more time to do what it's always done, which is rally around the issue, process it, and come to as much of a consensus as we can as a community about what can and can't accept. And it's going to do nothing but breed confidence in this body if we were to take that step. And I think it's going to do nothing but create a better sense of goodwill in the community about people who are diametrically opposed on this issue, and who just philosophically aren't going to align. But at least if they can have comfort in seeing a process play out that appears transparent, thoughtful, and as though it was handled in a way that's specific to our community, and quite frankly tries as much as possible to tune out the noise from the outside. We are in local government here. We are not here to make, I don't think, that our citizenry elects us to come here and try to address and deal with national issues on national timelines. We're here to try to do the best we can for the residents of Winooski. And so I can't support putting this on the ballot. I will say that if that's the decision of this body, I will go out and fight like hell for it, and try my best to make sure it does pass, because someday in the future, I do think that this is something that is going to be right for Winooski. I'd like to see us take a step back, set up a new timeline that includes doing all those things I just discussed in a thoughtful manner that looks at March. And you know what? I can't even tell you that I think March is the right timeline right now. And I'm not trying to say that to make this an indefinite thing that goes on forever. It's just we've been so full tilt and gear on this, we haven't had time to catch our breath and think about, okay, now that we understand where the issue is, how long is this going to take and what kind of public process should we have? I took up my 3 minutes and then some.
So I agree with a lot of what you said. I just want to reflect on a comment that was made that I really, resonates with me, and that was asking us to do what we think is right to build the community we want to live in. And the community I want to live in brings people to the table to have a discussion about the pros and the cons and the different points of view, and creates space for that and makes that okay for people to disagree and work it through. And not sort of draw some lines in the sand that says this is the right way, and if you're not with us, then you're afraid or you're not willing to take a stand. I think it's a complex issue. It's a really important issue for many people living in this community, and I do not think we've taken the time that we need to take to flesh that out and give people the space that they need to air their concerns, ask their questions, have thoughtful and concrete responses, not coulda, shoulda, woulda, maybe. I think it's a terrible process to not include the school district as an equal partner in this conversation. They are an equal partner in everything we do, and so we ought to treat them that way. So I would, again, I'm not philosophically opposed to all resident voting. I am definitely opposed to moving a process forward without giving voice to everybody that lives in this community and making sure that we are responding to their interests in a really comprehensive and thoughtful way. So I do not support moving forward with all resident voting in the November ballot. It's not because I'm afraid, it's because I want this community to have this conversation.
So I also strongly support the idea of all resident voting, the idea of enfranchising as many people as possible, and bring as many voices to the table as possible. We make decisions here all the time where we don't have all the answers, but we have as many as we think we can get to let voters make a well-informed decision. And after these last two meetings and the questions that we have surfaced, I don't currently feel like we have the information available to voters to make an informed decision this rapidly. It bothers me too that we haven't engaged the school district. This idea of, a potential negative the potential for negative reactions against our immigrant community, and we haven't actually talked to them about that. And how they feel about it bothers me. We have about 7 weeks to do any kind of engagement, and I don't feel confident that that is enough time to get where we need to be on this. I definitely want us to continue moving forward with investigating this and bringing this to our voters, but I also cannot support a November timeline.
Other comments, questions, concerns from council? And issues where it doesn't appear that there's unanimous potential. I'll just remind councilors that motions need to be made in the affirmative. Motions will be called for 3 times according to Robert's rules. And again, a motion must be in the affirmative. It cannot be in the negative. In other words, you can't say, I make a motion that we don't do something. You can only make a motion that we do something. And if you wish to vote for that, you vote yes. And if you wish to vote no, you vote no on the affirmative. So with that, last call. Any comments, questions, concerns from council?
I would make a motion to adopt the proposed amendment to the Winooski City Charter to be placed before Winooski voters on the November general election ballot, including language with voter checklist protections.
I second the motion.
Motion by Eric, second by Hal. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
No.
No.
No. With that, the item is did not pass. Okay. Just as a wind down conversation on that, I think there's a follow-up conversation as a result of this that'll occur, and we will bring this issue back as warned next time for something along the lines of next steps for working on this issue. And what exactly that will look like, I don't know, because we haven't put any time or thought into that. But we'll put some maybe additional timelines down, some facts, try to put all this information back out there, and then reassess what sensitive timelines are like. That's the best I can kind of do with that right now from a public warning perspective, is reapproach this from a timeline perspective. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested in language that would put together a committee as a next step. I think the committee should drive the process, not arbitrary timelines that we've set up, is my view, if we create a committee.
So we will bring back process opportunities, timeline opportunities. I don't know. And if there are other components, folks can send an email individually, not to the whole group, not to break open meeting laws, to Jesse and myself, and request if any specific content matters. We'll be sure to try to make sure those are addressed. Okay. Okay. And thank you for members of the public for attending this evening and weighing in. We appreciate your time. Okay, up next is discussion / approval for, sorry. Oh, yeah, we're gonna take we'll do a 2-minute recess, 3-minute recess. 2 minutes isn't fair. Well, let's reconvene at 8:25. It could be 4.5 minutes.
Section 558 of Title 16.
Legal voter.
Okay, we will now call back to order the Winooski City Council meeting and pick up our agenda where we left off. Up next is item D, discussion approval ordinance change consideration for repeal of section 6.14, aggressive begging panhandling.
So I'm going to have Chief Hebert come up. We talked about this quickly at the last meeting in city updates. As you know, we are one of the communities in the state that received the letter from the ACLU about panhandling ordinances. So there was a brief discussion about wanting to consider repealing our aggressive panhandling ordinance. So before you tonight is what such a repeal might look like. And if you are interested in continuing this, the action would be to move forward with a repeal and set a public hearing date. You could do that as early as September 1st to make the ordinance change. And the chief is here if you want to ask any questions about how we currently use this ordinance.
The response we heard from staff is there was no issue functionally from the way we do business or the experience of Winooski residents and their community as a result of this change.
There is not.
My recollection is that, just to be really clear, my recollection is this actually was founded and put into our ordinance as a result of the fact that the PTO used to have a coin drop. And literally we wove in and out of traffic when Winooski was just a four-way and caused massive backup. So again, just because I can't sit here and not take a shot back at an entity that decided to do this publicly versus actually sending us a letter or notice in some kind of legal way. My understanding historically in talking to people about this issue is that this had never had any kind of tenor or purpose in this community other than to, quite frankly, settle a little bit of a dispute as to whether that was an acceptable way to raise funds for the PTO or not. So I know there's a larger cascade of issues and this is sensitive to people, but I do want to put that in context from a historical perspective because I heard some pretty disturbing responses as to what the intent of the city was in that and felt the need to clarify that. Other questions, concerns, comments from council?
So I have a question about a legal review. So the letter from the ACLU, which is a highly regarded advocacy organization, made a number of allegations and assertions in a letter that claim that our ordinance is unconstitutional. It may very well be, but I have a problem with just taking at face value a letter from an advocacy organization making statements about our ordinance without going through some sort of process on our end to vet those claims with an attorney. I think it, again, to me, it's about good process. Good process is not we are in receipt of a letter and a press release saying we're afoul of the Constitution and we haven't taken any time or any steps on our end to verify some of those claims, in addition to refuting the motivations that were alleged in the letter. I think it's important to just make sure we're not just gonna sign off on something without doing some homework on our end.
I think for me, it's less, I'm in favor of repealing the ordinance, less because of that constitutional question and more just because from a value standpoint, I don't support aggressive panhandling bans. And if there's no operational impact on the way we're currently doing our work in the city, to me, that's a no-brainer. And then if there are additional questions about potential constitutionality that we could be liable for, that's a bonus that we don't have to deal with. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. I just don't like I'm not in favor of the ordinance to begin with. There's no operational impact to the city, so I am supportive of repealing it.
So to be clear, I think what you're saying and what was said at the last meeting is that we don't enforce this ordinance anyway?
So, the years have kind of blended, but when then Chief Steve McQueen did the rewrite of city ordinances, we looked at this and we changed it from panhandling in general to aggressive panhandling. And what that changed, although it was subtle, it was really for the really uncomfortable situations where somebody wasn't taking no for an answer and just really not being very polite about it. And the reason we felt it was important to keep it at the time was because we like to handle things locally here in Winooski, and that gave us the ability to refer somebody to the city attorney for maybe a possible different outcome, where the community justice center could get involved, where we could refer these people to services where they could do community service rather than a fine or jail time. So that's why it made sense at the time. We felt that it gave us a little bit more local control and some more creative ways to actually deal with the behavior.
And so what is it that is happening now?
We don't have aggressive panhandlers. I'm trying not to, I don't want to give too much information. So we actually had a situation at one of the city functions not too long ago where somebody very aggressively was approaching our senior citizens demanding some of their bingo money and saying, you need to give me the winnings. And we felt there was more there than the behavior, that there might be some mental capacity issues. So we got the community outreach team involved. They went to the person's residence, they spoke with them, and they did speak of this ordinance, and it stopped the behavior. They corrected the problem. So it does have some value, but it's not traditional what you think panhandling is sometimes. It's really a non-traditional thing that, you know, served a purpose pretty recently.
So if we have an aggressive panhandler, you, without this ordinance, still have recourse to address that issue.
So, yeah, I think it'd be easy to write an affidavit. Unfortunately, it'd be at the state level. So if somebody's threatening or tumultuous behavior, it's considered disorderly conduct, and it can be a whole bunch of different varying behavior that falls into threatening and tumultuous. Do you feel uncomfortable because of this person's behavior? They could still refer it back to the reparative board through the state process.
Other questions, comments, concerns from the council?
I'd be interested to hear from either you or Eli, is somebody less likely to be referred back to the reparative board in those cases if this did not exist? If there were other avenues we needed to pursue for, I guess it probably is too widely dependent on the situation, but if this ordinance wasn't on the books, whatever processes we needed to deal with that situation or behavior, is there still a very clear and likely path for somebody when applicable to go to the reparative board? Or
I think as long as our CJC continues to exist and function the way they do, I think that the court isn't going to take up a lot of time in criminal court for this type of case.
Mm-hmm.
That seems reasonable, but I mean, I'm on that reparative board, and I think that approach has a lot more impact on changing someone's behavior than some ordinance that, you know, slaps them on the hand or, and what is aggressive, you know. I just think more of a deeper conversation can really come out with a different outcome.
So I think the question before I haven't heard a lot of technical concerns. I think the one outstanding one is whether or not we invest any resources in regards to, I guess, validating the claim would be the appropriate way of saying it.
Well, I guess, I mean, if we're doing it on legal basis, then I'm not interested in taking another organization's say-so.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If it's just morally repugnant or operationally useless, you know, other grounds, then it doesn't seem like a good use of our resources. I'm not clear where folks are coming from. The big thrust of the letter was citation after citation of case law.
Yeah. Well, and I think it became the impetus to ask the question of, like, okay, to address this concern an entity has flagged, what's the operational and human impact on the ground to community members and to staff? So I think we're hearing, I can't answer the human one. I guess that's what we have to decide. If it's, you know, if we think it's moot that this exists. But from an operational perspective, it doesn't sound like there's too much there.
We'd still respond in the same way. We'd still offer the same services in the same way. We didn't, you know, get the community outreach team involved if that was appropriate. The only thing that will change, obviously, is that court will have to refer it back to our CJC. But that's why we have CJCs for cases that are low level and just quite honestly don't warrant the time in criminal court. So I'm pretty confident that they'll end up back at our reparative board either way.
Okay.
gives me slight pause that removing this could potentially send more people to like actual criminal justice versus the restorative justice board.
I understand that. The thing to remember is we haven't ever issued, since this ordinance change went into effect, we've never issued a ticket. We've never brought anybody to the reparative board. It's just another tool in the tool belt that it's there, it exists, and we're able to use it in a conversation to change somebody's behavior in that one instance.
I'm also a fan of not having laws that we are not using.
Other questions, comments, concerns from council?
I mean, I guess I just come back to process. So we get a letter, we had a very brief discussion about it. We don't have anything in writing from the city staff about sort of the rationale. It's all been sort of discussion. And I think there's probably a host of ordinances that we have on the books that we don't use. So I just feels like not a great process to say, oh, some advocacy group doesn't like the fact that we have this ordinance on the books, it's gone. And there's not a lot of analysis, I guess. And maybe we don't need to do any analysis, but it's not an approach that I'm real crazy about.
I think conversely, for me, it was less the letter triggering my response and more the letter triggering knowledge of the ordinance, not knowing that it was an ordinance prior. So,
Jesse, wanted to speak.
Sorry.
You can finish your thought.
That's it.
I just wanted to address Nicole's question directly. We have not had legal look at this at all. This was solely we received this letter, brought it to your attention. I read the tea leaves that there was interest in repeal. We don't need it from an operational standpoint, so we brought it to you. But absolutely, we could have legal review of the
Seems like it'd be a pretty quick item to have them look at. I would,
I think it's $1,000 of time to have them go through the legal citations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm not gonna draw a line in the sand that says we have to do it. I just need to be on the record that I find it very problematic. It seems like we're getting into and I guess this is our ordinance, we need to take responsibility for our ordinance, but we're having folks come to meetings or send us communications saying that we need to take a stand on this, that, or the other issue. That has operational impacts, even though if it doesn't have an operational impact, you're all spending time, we're spending time in a meeting responding to requests from outside groups who have a point to make. And I appreciate that there are points that need to be made, but I am frustrated by the amount of time that we're spending at this table on these types of issues when there are no recorded impacts on our residents. And instead, we've got a very ambitious housing agenda. We've got big things that we need to do. So I'll stop talking and register my frustration that way.
And I'll say, as the person that asked for it to come forward this time, my perception was that given some of the overlying threats was that we potentially bore more time and resources in not responding than we did in trying to address the concern in one manner or another. That there was the potential, given the nature and content of the letter, that we could end up, by ignoring it, because I don't philosophically disagree with you, I do, but that we could end up spending more time, money, and resources on addressing it. That was my concern.
That was a legal liability.
Correct.
In which case I do want a legal opinion, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess if that's something people want and feel like it's necessary, we can certainly ask for that. We can ask for our attorney and I think we would just need to be very pointed on whether or not it's about the issue of the legitimacy of the claim, if that's what you need to motivate or compel you to take an action or not take an action, or if it's just from a process perspective, you feel like it's important that they take a look at it from an ordinance review standpoint.
So I thought the same thing, like the reason we looked at this is because it was a legal liability and potentially would require time and money later. And then receiving the information that we don't need it operationally anyway means that we can just end it and avoid that legal investigation because we don't need the ordinance anyway.
I appreciate that perspective. I'm not gonna make a big stink out of it any more than I already have.
Your philosophical point is registered and understood, too. Other questions, concerns, comments? This item is, any questions, concerns, comments from the public? This item is on tonight as a discussion or approval item, so I will make a request for a motion. I would entertain a motion in regards to the ordinance change proposal for consideration for the repeal of section 6.14 aggressive begging panhandling as presented here this evening.
I move we repeal section 6.14.
Second.
And set a public hearing date of October 1st.
Sorry, what?
And to do that, you need to set a public hearing date. That's the next step.
Okay, I'm sorry,
And I move to repeal section 6.14 and set up a public hearing date of October 21st. Third.
October 1st.
October 1st.
At your next meeting.
Okay. All that,
Got it.
please.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Hal. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Item E, thank you very much, Chief Hebert. We appreciate you hanging out with us tonight.
No problem.
Good luck cooking. Let's see, where are we at? E, approval of municipal planning grant resolution.
Here's a refreshing fun one for you. I'm requesting your approval to ask for free money to do something that's your priority. So, I'd like to request approval to apply for a municipal planning grant in the amount of $22,000. We've been successful with these for the past 2 years. I don't know if we can be successful 3 years in a row, but we can sure try for it. They have increased the amount of the grant and decreased the amount of the required match.
Nice.
So instead of $20,000, we can ask for $22,000, and we have to do a match of a minimum of 10%. But we get extra points if we do more than 10%. So I'm proposing a match of 15%, $3,300. And if we're awarded the grant, I would come back with a request from CDC reserves for that. The use that we would put the grant money to is to develop a comprehensive wayfinding signage plan using an outside consultant. That would be for the downtown and for the gateways leading to the downtown. So this is something that was identified as a priority in the parking study, and it was implementation of the parking study is one of council's priorities for this year. So I would love to be able to apply for this and get some money and get moving on wayfinding in our city.
And planning commissions heard this on Thursday and expressed support as well, or excitement. And while Heather gave the same analysis that we have gotten a few times, so we could be challenged in that regard. So thanks for your work in doing this in the past and bringing it back again. Questions, concerns, comments from council? Questions, comments, concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the city's municipal planning grant resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Hearing seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you for visiting us today, Heather.
Thank you very much.
All right, item G, approval, request for use of wastewater reserve funds for the garage additions project.
So I'll let John explain this in summary. There were some questions that arose from a member of the public today in an email to you, and I responded to those, so I'm happy to walk through those today as well. We're on that email as well.
Sure. So this is a request for $60,000 to fund mechanical, electrical equipment for the new wastewater treatment plant garage. Funds will be taken from the sewer reserve fund. Just to give some background, so currently the project is in construction, so we're building a structural steel insulated facility. what we're requesting is, instead of waiting until potentially next fiscal year to add in some MVP equipment, do it now while contractors are mobilized. So right now, with the structural, with the current garage, it could be used as cold storage for the winter, but trying to save some additional money and not pushing it to next year is what I'm trying to propose with this request.
Pretty comprehensive memo. Interesting, kind of cutting right to it and see if there's any questions from council in regards to this issue. I just want to note that one of the items mentioned here is that there's a requirement potentially that we spin down some of our reserve funds as part of the capital improvement project for Main Street, and this could count towards that, but we don't know. Correct? Yeah, just wanted to clarify that. Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually didn't understand why this wasn't included to begin with and why it's a separate cost now.
Sure, so originally the budget was at 250,000 plus we had an additional 40,000 in reserve fund. We were debating, well, one, we wanted to keep the project under budget and kind of keep with the process and not go over budget and ask above what we needed originally. And the thought was we could do the project, it could be functional, it's cold storage, we could place our sweeper in there for the winter, still make DPW more operational, getting out snow plows and get some other equipment down there, but and then do the electrical equipment, put in the CIP, do it the way that we should be doing it. But then looking back, it's with the contractors down there, it's going to cost us more money if we wait and do it next year. So we also looked at if there was funding in operational funds to do it without having to pull from reserve funds, and there wasn't. So that's why we're here tonight.
I think just reading between the lines, obviously the preference is for when these things come forward to be holistic and a full picture of what the expenditures are going to be. That goes without saying in a request like this, so it's understood those things said, but we have to say that we're required to in making those decisions. It's really great to know anything that may come later too. Go ahead, sorry, Jesse.
Well, and I think just to that point, I think it's, especially at 9:15, I think it's important for me as your staff person to say, we did not put enough money into this to begin with to do it comprehensively. And it was before John was here, it was certainly not, he's fixing a historic problem of a not funded appropriately project from the beginning. And I think what we were trying to do in the interim was see what we could achieve within the budget dollars we had. And that still works. We are building that project, it works as is, but given that we have these reserves and given that there is an economic advantage to doing it now while the contractor is on site, and it's an ad alternate in the contract that we signed with them. We thought it was prudent to bring that forward to you for a request now, as opposed to putting 70,000 or 75,000 into next year's CIP to bring it to you now at the lower rate with the use of reserves. But certainly we should have budgeted appropriately for this the first time around, and that's my responsibility.
What do you think is the cost savings to do it now versus going back in?
I think 70 grand is probably what, if I was going to put in the CIP for next year, I would probably put that additional contingency, so it would be somewhere in the 70, 80 grand range versus the 50 to 60 we're looking at.
It's not ideal, but these things happen. Questions, comments, concerns from council? Questions, comments, concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval for the request for use of wastewater reserve funds for the garage additions project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for all your work. Angela, thank you for all your work. Item H, approval of Vermont League Cities and Towns Municipal Policy Positions.
Sorry, that's me. So Town Fair is fast approaching. Last time I brought to you the policy positions as Policy positions as drafted by VLCT for consideration at Town Fair Day. You had asked for their track changes document so you could see what had changed year to year. And this is what they were able to provide. It was done a little differently this year by breaking it out into those subject areas, but I think you get the idea of what was truly amended. I also included, you had asked a question at the last meeting about what your recommendations were last year, so I've included that in the cover sheet, what you were focusing on last year, some of which have changed slightly, implications of which have changed slightly. But really the discussion tonight is your appetite to support the policy positions as drafted, and if there are specific things you would like to provide me guidance on as I go and vote on these policy positions at Town Fair. I don't think you actually need to vote on that, but guidance you want to provide would be great.
Okay, so let's open it up to see if folks had specific items that they wish to address.
I've already raised this with the folks at the League of Cities and Towns, but if they can find a simple and transparent education finance system, they will get many gold stars.
What jumped out at me, I'm still on board with everything we said last year. I think it's all still applicable. Which the only things that jumped out at me that I didn't like is pretty much section 1.03 in its entirety, with the exception of number 1. I'm okay with applying open meeting and public records laws to legislative and executive branches of state government, but not to entities that receive state or municipal funding, i.e. nonprofits, or fire departments, etc. So I don't like that whole section. There's the majority of items are similar to what we advocated for last year.
Did we weigh in?
You did, that was one of your recommendations last year as well, was
Yeah.
to oppose the requirement for nonprofits.
With this, I am okay though with open meeting and public records,
Yeah.
but I don't, like increasing the posting times, I'm not supportive of. Yeah, some of the public records, I don't think there's anything in there that I do support.
Could we safely send Jesse to the table saying that we have have concerns regarding some of the obligations this would place either municipal committees and commissions or recipients of funding organization committees, that we believe that this needs to be looked at globally more carefully?
Yeah, but then, there's other stuff in that section. Oh, yeah, okay. And then there is a voting section of there too, so I'm still in opposition of a gap day. And then I would also be interested in us having a discussion if we would like to encourage the league to take a position on encouraging the legislature to pass enabling legislation allowing municipalities to to set qualifications for municipal voters.
Okay.
Very much in the vein of the previous discussion we were just having.
Well, let's make sure to park that in that same issue category from a next steps conversation, because it sounds like that could be coordinated with that effort. I'm getting them to do that at this meeting, I think might be
Well, I guess, it was
challenging lift.
a question of how, is there a time that in order to put this document together, VLCT opens up for suggestions? Okay.
So VLCT runs policy committees all year that spend time working on this slate of recommendations. So certainly I can bring that forward to you when they're appointing that committee next year, and we could have a discussion about, do we want to advocate for Winooski rep on the committee that would be looking at that?
I think flagging that issue is something that we're gonna ask them for an opinion on is important.
Yep.
Whether it's Maura or Karen or whoever, just so they're aware that that's coming, because they have a process too for that, where you put something in front of them and say, give us your opinion. Like, do you support this, essentially. And they'll huddle on that and give a reaction. It would be a nice ally on that.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't just, they are a membership organization. I don't just mean locally for us here, but I would be encouraging for me if we engage in discussions with them to have them get that on their radar as a potential priority for all municipalities. That way, the state has it seems in their vein that they would be in favor in many instances of the legislature adopting enabling legislation that provides more local control, whether or not a municipality wants to do it or not.
So I'm happy to flag that for staff of the league. Just on this vein, we can talk about this more in next steps with the all resident voting, but it does occur to me also that the manager in Montpelier that's also considering this charter change is on the board of directors for the league, so it might be a political call too.
Yep. I just didn't know if they have, if you're voting on, yes, we would like this as a priority, or no, we wouldn't, if they also say, is there anything else that's on people's radars? Is that part of the process?
No, not like that. It's a very prescribed process where you like hold up cards to vote on each one after a debate. So there's not necessarily kind of a ad hoc or collect all
New business.
Totally.
But I think I can certainly flag it for staff as you guys talked about and
Future discussions.
Yep. And if there's a conversation, sometimes conversations do happen in the room about policy position things, and if that conversation is happening, I think it would be an appropriate time to say, my community is looking at that, and we don't have any necessarily proposals for this year, but we would like for it to be considered for a future year or something along those lines.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm hearing that the document's good guidance that you provided from background information. Other questions, comments, thoughts from council?
I had one, so a lot of this, I agree with the stuff from last year and a lot of what's in here. One thing that caught my attention that I actually don't have a lot of information about myself is under section 4.02 about Act 250 and delegating responsibility to municipalities. And I wondered if that's something that's going to burden us with something the state is currently doing. Or is it a benefit to us?
No.
So this is a very large conversation happening at the state level right now about how Act 250 applies and so there's a set of exemptions under Act 250. Projects don't have to go to Act 250 if they meet these set of exemptions. And there's a conversation among professionally managed cities because, keep in mind that there are very few communities in Vermont that actually have land use regulations, period, and then zoning administrators who are implementing those land use regulations. So the conversation happening with planners and cities is, do we ask for an Act 250 exemption for all development in communities where there are land use regulations approved and placed by the local community, and there are professionals prepared to do that review. So this is my personal opinion. You guys have not weighed in on this. I think that would be an appropriate exemption. I've certainly seen good projects in Winooski stall out because of Act 250 review. Like they haven't even tried to be permitted because they didn't want to go to Act 250. And when we as a state are trying to promote development within our densely populated areas and keep our rural landscape and promote energy goals, having people live and work and transit in more densely based communities and keeping our rural communities more rural, I think that's an appropriate achievement of the statewide goal. So yes, it would place burden back on us. We also have professional staff who could manage this. It is not something that you all have weighed in on, so I have not made
It's a huge philosophical argument that's taking place in Montpelier right now. So and there's going to be open Act 250 hearings, which we will have an opportunity to weigh in on if we so choose. And I can guarantee that we will be asked to provide some kind of testimony or feedback, and we will be poked by the league to comment on that. So the league will formulate their opinion, and they'll put out a white paper that basically says this is what we believe, and we'll be asked to either support that or sign on to pushing on it.
I thought it might be a pretty large thing. I appreciate the context. So I'm not pushing for us to move forward with making
it'll be one of the biggest issues, I think, coming up in this legislature. I mean, opening up to Act 250 is a huge deal. So, other comments, questions, thoughts? And it's a huge impact here. I think you're right. To me, this is a more informal process where I don't feel compelled to call for a vote for anything specific. I think we gave some guardrails and some feedback, unless any counselors feel specific pressure to that. I don't really feel like we put enough directive in there to qualify as a vote, in my opinion. Any questions, comments, concerns from the public? Even Whitenberg doesn't have anything to say? Okay. Act 250 is a great thing, right? So that concludes the regular items on tonight's agenda, with the exception of one item that's slated for executive session. Executive session would be pursuant to VSA 313(1)E, and it's related to two items. Number one is pending litigation to which the public body is a party. Keep in mind, we are publicly stating the name of that case, which is UMB Bank National Association versus the City of Winooski. So it is actually pending litigation and active in court, so folks can find public documents related to that matter there. And then also the negotiation of real estate and purchase and lease options. And again, because that case has to do with land and potential negotiations regarding real estate, that is the secondary piece of this topic and subject. Tonight we've recommended executive session, so the city's not put at a legal disadvantage in either case, or to hinder the negotiation ability of the city. To do so in public would negatively damage the public body's ability to do so in the best interest of its citizens and residents. We are proposing to go in executive session, bringing with us City Manager Jesse Baker. We are also bringing Stephanie Haley and Angela Other, the city accountant, as well with us. That's what's proposed. Any questions or concerns from council? Any questions or concerns from the public? City council will enter an executive session. There will be no formal action taken.
Need a motion?
Hold on 1 second. There will be no formal action taken at this meeting. Any formal action taken as a result of any discussions on this topic would be voted on in public. Council will re-enter its session only to adjourn, and will cover no additional business this evening. So with that, I would entertain a motion to enter an executive session under those terms.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Seeing hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Again, council will reconvene only to adjourn.